It was the sort of afternoon that would go unnoticed if you didn't happen to be paying attention. The sky, a pale blue washed with the softest of clouds, stretched endlessly above, while the village below hummed with the usual quiet rhythm of life. The wind whispered through the trees, their leaves dancing in small secret movements, and the scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the air, grounding everything in the moment. But it was strange, wasn't it? How such days, so seemingly ordinary, could still make you feel like you were standing on the edge of something unknown, something vast. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. A boy named Elian stood at the edge of the field, eyes half-lidded, watching as the last rays of sunlight kissed the tops of the tall grass. It was his favorite spot, this corner of the village where the horizon spread out before him like a story that had yet to be written. The grass whispered with every breeze, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Elian felt as if it was speaking directly to him, telling him things he didn't quite understand. He shifted his weight and knelt down, fingers brushing the cool earth. The ground felt alive, the soil warm from the sun's embrace, a feeling that settled deep within him like it was meant for something more than simply being walked upon. It was as though the land itself was a keeper of secrets, secrets it was sharing with him, just as the wind, like an old friend, would murmur things in his ear that no one else could hear. Elian's world had always been filled with these subtle mysteries, these quiet moments that seemed insignificant but felt profound. No one else in the village seemed to notice them, or if they did, they dismissed them with a shrug, assuming it was just the wind, the shadows, or the rustling of trees. But Elian had always known better. He'd learned to listen in a way that others didn't. It was something he had inherited, something passed down from his grandmother, whose old eyes would gleam with knowing when she would tell him stories of a time long ago when things were different. When the world wasn't just what it appeared to be. There's magic in the quiet, she had told him once when he was still young, sitting by the fireplace with her as the fire crackled. Not the kind that glows and sparkles, but the kind that lingers, soft and gentle. You'll find it in the spaces between the words, in the stillness of the night, and in the moments when you stop and listen. Elian had often wondered what she meant by that, but he never asked. There were too many questions and not enough answers. He'd come to realize that not everything needed to be understood. Sometimes, simply experiencing something, truly feeling, it was enough. And as the years passed, he grew accustomed to the strange, subtle things that surrounded him. It wasn't until that day, however, that Elian began to feel that something had shifted. There was a warmth in the air, a golden light stretching lazily over the field, but there was something else, a feeling, a pull, as if the earth itself were beckoning him to step further, to discover something hidden beneath the surface. It was a quiet invitation, but it felt urgent, like a secret was begging to be found. He stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from his knees, and glanced around. The field was empty, as it always was, save for the scattered wildflowers and the distant hum of life beyond the village. He felt no fear, there was no danger here, only a quiet promise of something just out of reach. He had been on the edge of understanding for so long now, too long perhaps, and yet he still couldn't make sense of it. That was the way of things here, patience and waiting, a lot of waiting. But today, something had changed. The air felt alive in a way that it never had before. Elian took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy fragrance of the grass, the smell of summer's end. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind, to the trees, to the birds, the quiet thrum of life that surrounded him. Everything was just as it should be. Yet somehow not. When he opened his eyes, there was a flicker of movement in the distance. At first it was so faint he wasn't sure if he had imagined it, but then it came again, a flash of light, brief but undeniable, like a star falling from the sky. It hovered just above the horizon, as if suspended between this world and the next. His heart quickened, his breath catching in his throat. Elian didn't move at first. His feet felt heavy, as though they were rooted to the earth, his body frozen in place by a mixture of awe and something else, something he couldn't quite name. The light flickered again, longer this time, and the sense of being watched, of something larger than him taking notice, settled deep in his chest. It was a calling. But who or what was calling him? The light vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the faintest aftertaste of wonder. A soft shimmer in the air that lingered in the space where it had once been. Elian stood still, his mind spinning, as the evening continued on as if nothing had happened. Yet in his heart, he knew it had. And something within him stirred, a feeling that this quiet, seemingly ordinary moment would lead to something extraordinary. He turned and began to walk back toward the village, a sense of anticipation growing inside him. Something was unfolding. Something had begun, and Elian, for all his quiet contemplation, knew that he had been waiting for this. The days that followed were not unlike the ones that came before. The village returned to its slow, steady pace. People went about their work, farmers, tending to their crops, the baker kneading dough, the children playing in the fields. But something in Elian had shifted. It was as if a door had opened inside him, just a crack, and the world beyond seemed different. He could no longer look at the ordinary without seeing the strange, the subtle hints that had once gone unnoticed. It was early one morning, just before the sun had fully risen, when he felt it again. That pull, the weight of it, like the land itself was calling him. The earth beneath his feet felt charged, alive. He stood in the small garden behind his house, staring at the edge of the forest that bordered the village. The trees stood still, but there was a sense that they were waiting for something. "Elian?" The soft voice behind him made him turn. His grandmother, as always, was there, standing at the door with a look of knowing in her eyes. She hadn't aged much, not in the way others did. Her presence always felt timeless, as if she was a part of something much older than the village itself. "Morning, Gran," Elian said, though his voice was distant, preoccupied. "I was just—" "You were listening," she interrupted, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I could tell." Elian nodded, though he didn't fully understand what she meant. He had been listening, yes, but to what? He couldn't put it into words, but there was no mistaking the pull, the sensation that something was moving, something was about to happen. She stepped forward, her feet silent on the grass. "Do you feel it then?" she asked, her voice low, but not fearful. "The world is waking up," he hesitated, then nodded again. "Yes, I think I do." His grandmother's gaze softened, and for the first time in a long while Elian saw something else in her eyes, not just the quiet wisdom she always carried, but a trace of worry, of caution. "You felt the shift," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "It's not just the land calling, Elian, it's something else, something ancient." Elian stood still, the weight of her words sinking in. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the forest, her eyes narrowing slightly as though she were searching for something just beyond the trees. "When you were young," she began slowly, "I told you about the world that lies beyond the one we know, about the secrets buried deep in the earth, hidden in the stars, in the space between moments. There are things here, Elian, that the village doesn't know, things that have been waiting for the right time to awaken." Elian felt a cold shiver run down his spine, though it wasn't fear that gripped him. It was something else, a deep, resonant sense of recognition, as if he had always known this moment would come. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. She turned to him then, her gaze steady. "I'm saying that you are connected to all of it, to the land, to the stars, to the secrets that have been hidden away for so long. You've always known, Elian, but now, it's time to remember." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the silence that followed. Elian's mind raced, but his grandmother only offered a gentle smile, her hands resting on his shoulders in a quiet gesture of reassurance. She didn't need to say more. He understood. "Come with me," she said softly, turning toward the path that led to the edge of the forest. "There's something I need to show you." Elian didn't hesitate. It wasn't that he didn't have questions or that he wasn't afraid. It was simply that everything inside him, every instinct, told him that this was where he needed to go. This was the moment he had been waiting for. They walked together in silence, the morning sun now fully risen, casting a soft golden light over the land. The air was still cool, but the warmth of the sun began to seep through the trees, coaxing the world awake. Birds sang softly overhead, but the forest ahead felt quiet, as if holding its breath. When they reached the clearing, Elian noticed something he hadn't before. There was a stone, weathered by time and the elements, standing tall at the center of the clearing. It wasn't large, but it was ancient, its surface etched with markings he couldn't read. Yet they felt familiar, like they belonged to him. His grandmother stopped in front of it, her hands raised as though offering something to the stone itself. "This is where it began," she said softly. "This is where the land and you were bound together." Elian's heart skipped a beat. He stepped closer to the stone, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. There was a warmth emanating from the stone now, a hum that vibrated through his very bones. He reached out, his fingers grazing the surface, and as soon as he did, the world seemed to shift. The sky above darkened, and for a moment, everything around him blurred, like he was seeing through the veil of time itself. He felt memories flood his mind, strange and foreign, but unmistakably his. Flashes of moments he had never lived, places he had never seen, voices he had never heard. And then, just as quickly, the world returned to its normal state, the sun still shining, the birds still singing. But Elian knew, he knew, that something had changed. Something within him had unlocked. He pulled his hand back from the stone, his breath coming in short, excited gasps. "Gran? What was that?" His grandmother smiled, her expression calm but knowing. "It was the beginning of your remembering. The world is vast, Elian, and you are a part of it in ways that you can't yet understand. But now the door has opened. There's much more to see, much more to learn." Elian looked at the stone again, the markings now faint but still visible, glowing softly. There was no mistaking it. He had touched something far beyond the reach of this small village. And though he didn't yet know what that meant, he felt in his very soul that this was just the start of something much bigger. Elian's mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts as he walked back from the clearing. The stone, the markings, the feeling of something unlocking inside him. It all swirled together in his chest like a dream he couldn't quite piece together. Each step he took felt lighter, yet more laden with meaning, as if the earth beneath his feet was alive with secrets it had been waiting to share. His grandmother walked beside him, her presence calm and steady, as though none of this were new to her. She had known all along, he realized. She had always known what was coming. The path back to the village was quiet, the world still basking in the soft glow of early morning. Birds flitted from tree to tree, the rustle of their wings barely audible. The village nestled in the valley below looked unchanged, serene and familiar, but Elian could feel the shift within him. It was as though he was no longer entirely of this place. The land, the forest, the stone. It was all connected to something far greater, something vast. He glanced at his grandmother, who had been unusually silent since they left the clearing. "Gran," he asked quietly, his voice tentative, "what was that? What did I feel when I touched the stone?" She smiled. A soft, knowing smile, but there was something deeper in her gaze now. A flicker of something far older, far wiser. "You felt the thread, Elian. The thread that ties you to all things. It's not something that can be explained. In words, not yet. But it's always been there beneath the surface of your life." He furrowed his brow. "The thread?" She nodded. "Yes. The connection that binds you to this world, to the earth, to the stars, and to everything in between. You've always had it, but now it's awake. Now you'll begin to understand how to follow it." Elian's heart beat faster. The idea that he was connected to something so ancient, so vast, was both thrilling and unsettling. He had spent his entire life in this small village, surrounded by the mundane rhythms of everyday life. And now it felt as though he had stepped into something much larger, something he wasn't fully prepared for. "But how do I follow it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. His grandmother's gaze softened. "That, my dear, is the journey. It's not something that can be forced or rushed. It will unfold in its own time, just as your understanding will. But there are steps you can take, small acts, quiet moments. Pay attention. Trust what you feel and the rest will come. As they walked down the narrow path toward the village, Elian noticed the world around him in a new light. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching toward the sky as if they were part of the same pulse, the same rhythm. The wind felt warmer, more alive, and the air seemed to shimmer with possibility. He could hear the faint hum of something beyond the ordinary, something just out of reach. The village was still asleep. When they arrived, the cobblestone streets were empty, save for the occasional bird fluttering past. The only sounds were the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a rooster announcing the start of the day. Elian's grandmother paused at the doorstep of their small cottage, her hand resting on the doorframe. "I must go inside," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "There are things I must prepare for you. You'll need to understand more before long, and when the time comes, I'll be here." Elian nodded, though 100 questions swirled in his mind. What would happen next? Where would this thread take him? And what was he supposed to do with the strange, awakening power he had felt in the clearing? Before he could speak, his grandmother turned to enter the house. "Remember, Elian," she said softly, "everything is connected. Pay attention to the small things. They are the key." With that, she disappeared into the warmth of the cottage, leaving Elian standing in the quiet, morning light. For a long moment he didn't move. His mind raced with the possibilities, the implications of what his grandmother had said. Was there more to this place than he had ever imagined? More to him? He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. The thread was there somewhere, and it was calling to him. He could feel it. He would find it. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the village, Elian knew that the journey had only just begun. The next few days passed in a blur of restless energy. Elian couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for something, waiting for the next step, for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. But nothing happened, nothing except the usual rhythms of village life, the quiet chatter at the market, the rhythmic clink of hammers on nails, the low murmur of the villagers as they went about their work. But Elian couldn't shake the feeling that it was all leading up to something just beyond his reach. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind, "Pay attention to the small things." One evening after supper, he decided to take a walk through the fields, hoping that the solitude would help him clear his thoughts. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the air was cool, the scent of earth and grass heavy in the twilight. As he walked, Elian's gaze drifted to the distant forest. Something was different tonight. There was a stillness to the air, a weight that pressed down on him, as if the world itself were holding its breath. He paused for a moment, listening. The wind had stopped. The birds had fallen silent. Even the distant hum of the village seemed to have quieted. It was as though the whole world was waiting. Then, just as he was about to turn back, he saw it. A flicker of light, far in the distance, beyond the trees. It was small at first, like a distant star, but it grew brighter, drawing him toward it. Without thinking, Elian began to walk toward the light. Each step seemed to draw him further from the familiar, deeper into the unknown. The thread was pulling, again, and this time he would follow it. Elian's feet moved without conscious thought, drawn toward the light that shimmered in the distance. The further he walked, the more the world around him seemed to fade away, as if the very landscape was blurring at the edges, leaving only him and the beckoning glow. The cool air seemed to grow warmer, as if it too was responding to the pull. Every step felt like it was taking him deeper into something unknown, yet entirely familiar, as if he had walked this path before in a dream. The flickering light ahead grew brighter with each passing moment. It wasn't just a glow, it was a presence. It filled the air, humming with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. Elian could feel it in his chest, the sensation of something vast and ancient reaching out to him. He didn't know why, but he was no longer afraid. In fact, there was a quiet sense of rightness to it all, as if this was simply how things were meant to be. As he approached the edge of the forest, the light became clearer, stronger. and he could see that it was coming from a small clearing, hidden just beyond the trees. He hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the village. The familiar rooftops and chimneys were now little more than shadows against the night sky. The village seemed so distant, so small now. There was nothing left for him there, not anymore. His gaze returned to the clearing, and without another thought, Elian stepped forward, pushing through the underbrush until he emerged into the open. The clearing was bathed in a soft, golden light, unlike anything he had ever seen before. It wasn't the harsh glow of a fire or the pale light of the moon. This light was warm and inviting, gentle, as though it were a living thing, soft, breathing, and alive. At the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, ancient and weathered, with the same intricate markings he had seen before on the stone near the village, the same markings that had felt like an invitation to him, as though they had been waiting for him, calling to him. But it wasn't just the altar that drew him in. It was the presence, the energy that filled the air. He could feel it now, palpable and undeniable. It wasn't just the earth or the stars, it was something more, something beyond. And then, as if in answer to his unspoken question, the light shifted, forming into a shape before him. At first it was indistinct, a shifting, glowing form, but as Elian stepped closer, it solidified into something more tangible, more real. A figure, tall, cloaked in light, with features that were both familiar and strange. It was neither man nor woman, but something altogether different, something otherworldly. The figure stood still for a moment, watching him with eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. Elian could feel it, the weight of those eyes, the intensity that settled into his very soul. He wanted to speak, to ask, to demand answers, but no words came. He felt that the figure, this being, would answer only when it was ready, and then it spoke. The voice soft but resonant, as though it came from the air itself, from the earth, from the very stars above. "You've come far, Elian," it said, the words drifting through the space between them. "You've always known, haven't you? Even when you didn't understand." Elian's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't known. Not exactly. But now, standing here in the presence of this being, he realized that he had always felt the pull, the thread that had led him here. "I don't understand," he managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "What is this place? Who are you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. It tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question, or perhaps the boy himself. "I am many things," it said at last, its voice a soft echo that seemed to resonate from everywhere at once. "I am a reflection of what you seek, a guide on the path you are to walk. But that is not what matters now. What matters is what you choose to do next." Elian felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. What did it mean? What path was it talking about? He had always believed there was something beyond the ordinary, something more. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. The figure extended one hand toward him, and the golden light around them seemed to pulse. "The thread you feel, it is not just for you," it continued. "It is for all things, the land, the sky, the people. It binds them together, and now it binds you to them. But there is more. You must understand what it is to be connected, what it means to carry the weight of that connection." Elian stepped back, feeling a sense of overwhelming responsibility settle on him. "I'm not ready," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I don't know how to carry all of this." The figure's gaze softened, its presence calming, reassuring. "No one is ever truly ready, Elian. We learn as we go. We grow through the steps we take, and with each choice, we come closer to understanding. This journey, your journey, is not one that can be rushed. It will unfold in its own time, but you must begin now." Elian's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on him. This was no longer just a path of curiosity or wonder. This was something much larger, something that would change him forever. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. How do I start? What do I do? The figure's hand lowered, and the light around them began to pulse more rapidly, as if it were guiding him. "You already have begun," it said simply. "You've taken the first step. Now you must walk. And just like that, the light began to fade, the figure dissolving into the air as though it had never been there. Elian stood alone in the clearing, his mind reeling, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. The thread was still there, pulling him forward, urging him on, and though he didn't yet know where it would lead, Elian knew that he had no choice but to follow. Elian stood alone in the clearing, the last remnants of golden light fading into the soft twilight. The figure was gone, and with it, the pulsing hum of the otherworldly presence that had filled the air only moments before. Silence descended upon the forest once more, broken only by the distant calls of night creatures settling in. He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs, but it did little to ease the heavy weight in his chest. The world felt both impossibly vast and achingly small, as if the enormity of everything was pressing down on him. Yet he was alone in the middle of it, left to carry the knowledge of the thread that connected him to it all. He could still feel its pull, that invisible line stretching out from his heart to the land, the stars, and everything beyond. It was a thread that tied him to the earth and to the universe itself, and now more than ever, it seemed like his every step was guided by something far greater than himself. He hadn't expected this, hadn't known what to expect. The path ahead, once so unclear, now seemed both obvious and impossibly obscure. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, only that he had to follow, had to keep moving. But where? Elian stood in the clearing for a long moment, unsure of what to do next. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Pay attention to the small things. He closed his eyes for a moment, willing himself to steady his thoughts. The world around him felt strange, as if it were waiting, listening, waiting for him to make the next move. And then, just as his thoughts began to settle, he felt it again, the pull. It was faint at first, like a whisper that only the most attentive could hear, but as he opened his eyes, it grew stronger. The air shifted just slightly, but enough to be noticed. A shift, a change that felt like the world itself was moving around him. Without thinking, Elian began to walk again, his feet carrying him forward without conscious effort. The pull was undeniable, a thread tugging at his very soul, guiding him through the darkness. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows across his path. The forest, which had seemed so vast and intimidating just hours before, now felt like an old friend, its sounds and rhythms strangely familiar. The pull led him deeper into the forest toward a place he had never been before. His mind raced, thoughts colliding with each other as he tried to make sense of it all. He hadn't realized just how far he had walked until the trees began to thin, and a new kind of quiet filled the air. It wasn't the silence of the forest. It was something else, something ancient and deeply still. And then he saw it. At the edge of the clearing, where the trees opened up to a broad, open space, stood a massive rock formation. It wasn't a natural stone like the one by his village, but a structure. Something shaped, carved. He felt it before he saw it. The familiar hum, the pulse of energy that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The markings were here. Two, faint but unmistakable, carved deep into the surface of the rocks. It was the same, yet not. The stone was larger, older, and it radiated power, a quiet strength that settled over him like a blanket. This was no ordinary place. This was the heart of something, something that connected all things. The thread had led him here. Elian stepped closer, his heart beating faster with each step, the pull of the stone growing stronger. He reached out, fingers trembling as he touched the surface. The moment his skin made contact, something shifted inside him, like a door unlocking, a rush of awareness flooding through his body. Memories, strange, foreign, but unmistakably his, flooded his mind. Flashes of images, of places he had never seen but somehow recognized, of people he had never met but knew. The ground beneath him seemed to hum, vibrating with a quiet, steady rhythm. He closed his eyes, trying to focus on the sensations rushing through him. The markings on the stone glowed faintly, responding to his touch, as though acknowledging his presence, as though he too were part of this ancient pulse. Then, just as quickly, the flood of sensations stopped. The stone's hum faded, leaving behind a stillness that settled deep in his bones. Elian stepped back, his mind reeling, unsure of what had just happened. The thread was still there, stronger now, pulling at him, urging him forward. He looked around, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his mind racing with questions. What was this place? Why had he been led here? What did it mean? The answers, he knew, weren't for him to find just yet. He wasn't ready. But the journey, his journey, was just beginning. As he stood there in the clearing, the moonlight casting long shadows across the stone, Elian felt a quiet, profound sense of knowing settle over him. He didn't need all the answers now. What mattered was that he was following the thread, one step at a time, and with that he took another step forward, the pull of the thread still strong within him, guiding him into the unknown. Elian didn't stop walking, even as the clearing began to fade into the distance behind him. The forest around him felt different now, less like an obstacle and more like a companion, its shadows no longer intimidating, but welcoming. There was an ease in his steps, as though he were being guided through the darkness by something deeper than mere instinct. The pull, the thread, was still there, stronger than ever, urging him onward with quiet insistence. The moon above was full now, its light spilling through the canopy in silvery beams, casting the world in a soft, ethereal glow. The air was cooler, but it didn't feel heavy, just calm, like the world had been paused, holding its breath. Elian could feel the stillness in his bones, a quiet sort of peace that had settled over everything, wrapping the night in a sense of ancient tranquility. As he walked, he thought about what his grandmother had said, about the thread, about connection. It was all beginning to make more sense now. He had always known there was more to the world than what was visible, more to life than the simple rhythms of the village. But now it felt like that knowledge had deepened, like something inside him had finally clicked into place. He wasn't just moving through the world anymore. He was part of it, woven into its fabric in ways he hadn't yet begun to understand. His mind kept drifting back to the stone, to the way it had hummed beneath his fingertips, as though it recognized him. What had that been? And the presence, the figure, what was that? It hadn't given him answers, only more questions, more uncertainty. But there was something in the way it had looked at him, something in the quiet urgency of its words that told him everything was exactly as it should be. He was on the right path, even if the path itself was still unclear. The further he walked, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisting in odd shapes, their roots rising from the ground in knots and coils. The foliage was denser, more vibrant, as though the forest itself were alive, pulsing with energy. It was beautiful, but there was something strange about it too, a sense that the land itself was watching him, waiting for something to happen, and then, as if in answer to his thoughts, the pull grew stronger. It tugged at him, sharp and insistent, pulling him forward with an almost irresistible force. Elian stumbled for a moment, his feet slipping on the uneven ground, but he caught himself, steadying his breath. The path was narrowing now, the trees close enough that he had to duck beneath low-hanging branches. It was almost as if the forest itself was closing in around him, urging him forward, compelling him to reach whatever lay ahead. There was a flicker of light ahead, faint but unmistakable. Elian's heart skipped a beat as he quickened his pace, the pull now stronger than ever, guiding him toward the light. The forest seemed to open before him, and he emerged into another clearing, this one far different from the last. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the ground beneath his feet was softer, as though it had been untouched for centuries. At the center of the clearing stood a figure, bathed in a soft, warm glow. It was tall, wrapped in a cloak of shimmering light, its features indistinct, just like the figure from before. But this time, there was something more to it, something deeper. The figure stood motionless, its gaze fixed on him as if waiting. As if it had been expecting him, Elian stopped a few paces away, his breath catching in his throat. The thread, the pull, had led him here to this moment, and he felt something within him stir. This was it. The moment when everything changed. He didn't know how or why, but he knew he had reached the turning point. The answers, whatever they were within his grasp. The figure extended its hand, the light swirling around it like the very fabric of the night itself. Elian hesitated for a moment, But something in the stillness of the moment told him he had no choice but to reach out. Slowly his hand moved forward, trembling slightly as he closed the distance between them. The moment his fingertips brushed against the figure's hand, a flood of sensations rushed through him, sharper than anything he had ever felt before. Images flashed through his mind, places he had never seen, people he had never known, but all of them felt familiar. 1,000 voices whispered in his ears, speaking words he couldn't fully understand. Yet the meaning of them was clear. He could hear the hum of the earth, the pulse of the stars, the whisper of the wind through the trees. He was a part of all of it, bound to it in a way that transcended time and space. The figure's voice, softer now, filled the air around him, almost a whisper. "You have felt the pull, Elian," it said, its words rippling through the fabric of his being. "The thread that binds you to this world, to all worlds. Now you must understand what it is to carry that burden, to walk the path you have chosen, to be the bridge between the worlds." Elian's heart pounded in his chest, his mind spinning with the weight of the figure's words. He wasn't sure what any of it meant, but he could feel it, feel the truth of it deep within him. This was his journey, his purpose, and though he didn't understand it fully, he knew that there was no turning back. The thread had connected him to something far greater than himself, and now he had to find his place within it. The figure stepped back, its hand lowering, and the light around it seemed to fade, leaving only the soft glow of the clearing. "The path will not be easy," it said, its voice now almost gentle, "but you are ready. You will find your way, in time." With that, the figure faded into the air, dissolving into the very fabric of the forest itself. The glow lingered for a moment, longer then vanished, leaving Elian standing in the clearing, the weight of the world settling on his shoulders. He didn't move at first, the enormity of the moment sinking in. There was no rush now, no urgency. The thread was still there, still pulling at him, but now it felt different. Now it was his to follow, at his own pace. Elian took a deep breath, letting the quiet stillness of the forest wash over him. He didn't have all the answers, but he had the thread, and for now, that was enough. Elian remained in the clearing for a long while after the figure had vanished, the silence pressing in around him, as though the world itself had paused to wait for him to take the next step. The moon had shifted in the sky, now hanging higher, its pale light spilling down in shimmering beams that seemed to touch every leaf, every blade of grass, with a gentle caress. He stood there, rooted in place, feeling the hum of the earth beneath his feet, that familiar, unbroken connection. But something had changed in him. He could feel it deep within his bones. The figure's words echoed in his mind. "The thread that binds you to this world, to all worlds." That was the key, wasn't it? The thread, his purpose. But what did it mean to carry that burden? What was it he was supposed to do with all this new knowledge, this new awareness of how deeply connected he was to everything around him? He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze wash over him. It was as if the world had been waiting for him to understand something that had always been there, just out of reach. But now, as the pieces of his journey began to fall into place, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Was he ready for this? The clearing was so still, so quiet, that it almost felt like a dream, a place that existed only between waking and sleep, where time moved slower, where things whispered on the edge of consciousness, yet it was real. And he was standing in the midst of it, as if the forest itself had granted him this space, this moment to understand. The pull of the thread tugged at him again, gentle but insistent, drawing him forward. He couldn't linger forever in this place of quiet reflection. He had to move. With one last glance at the empty space where the figure had stood, Elian turned and made his way back into the forest. The path was clearer now, more defined, as though the trees themselves had opened the way for him. The air was still warm, but the heaviness of the night had lifted, and the world seemed to breathe with him, alongside him. The journey ahead was no longer just about finding answers. It was about becoming something more than he had ever imagined, something tied to the very pulse of the world itself. But what? And how? The questions were still there, hanging in the air, waiting for him to make sense of them. But he knew one thing for sure: the path had already begun. There was no going back. He walked for what felt like hours, his feet carrying him through the dense forest, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, creating shifting patterns of light and dark that danced in time with the rhythm of his steps. There was no urgency, no rush, just a quiet sense of purpose as the thread pulled him deeper into the heart of the forest. The further he went, the more he noticed the subtle changes around him. The air felt different, richer somehow. The ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse in time with the beating of his heart. It was as if the world was waking up, responding to him in ways he couldn't explain. And then, just as the last remnants of doubt began to fade, he saw it, a faint glow in the distance, just beyond the trees. It wasn't the same light as before, but it felt familiar, like a continuation of something that had already begun. The pull in his chest intensified, and Elian quickened his pace, his heart beating faster in anticipation. When he reached the clearing, he stopped. The sight before him took his breath away. At the center of the clearing stood a great stone arch, ancient and worn, its surface covered in the same intricate markings he had seen before. But this wasn't just a stone arch. It was alive, glowing, softly, pulsing with a rhythmic energy that matched the steady beat in his chest. The markings on the stone seemed to shift as he approached, swirling and rearranging themselves like living symbols, inviting him to understand something deeper. Elian stepped forward, drawn to the arch, the thread pulling him closer. The moment his hand touched the cool stone, a surge of energy coursed through him, filling him with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt before. The markings on the arch seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and in that moment, everything became clear. This is it. He understood now. The arch wasn't just a doorway. It was a symbol of the connection that tied him to everything: the earth, the stars, the forest. The thread wasn't just something that connected him to the land. It connected him to all of it, to the flow of the universe itself. The figure's words came back to him. You are the bridge between the worlds. He didn't fully understand it, but he felt it now. He was the one who could move between these spaces, between the visible and the unseen. He was the thread, the connector, the one who could weave the fabric of the world together. The light from the arch intensified, wrapping around him in a cocoon of warmth and energy. It was as if the universe itself was welcoming him, drawing him in to fulfill the purpose he had been called to. The path had led him here, and now there was no question of whether he was ready. He was ready because the thread had always been with him. It was who he was, and it was time for him to walk the path it had set before him. The air around him hummed with the power of the arch, and as Elian stepped forward, crossing the threshold, he felt the world shift. Not in a violent way, but in a soft, gentle manner, as if everything around him was realigning itself, finding its balance again. And with that shift, Elian knew that he was no longer just a part of the world. He was a part of the very force that connected all things. The world beyond the arch was a blur of light and shadow, shapes shifting in the periphery of Elian's vision, as though the very fabric of reality was adjusting itself to his presence. He stood at the threshold, the cool stone beneath his feet grounding him, yet he could feel the weight of something immense on the other side of the arch, something waiting. The thread pulled at him with a familiar yet deeper urgency, a call. He had no choice but to answer. With a steadying breath, he stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed into the space beyond the arch, everything changed. The air shifted, growing lighter, thinner, and yet there was an undeniable weight to it, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with possibility. It felt as though he was no longer bound by the same rules, as though time itself had stretched out before him, bending in ways that defied logic. The ground beneath him was not the soft, familiar earth of the forest floor, but something different, more fluid, more dynamic. He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. What he saw was both familiar and strange. The world before him was not a physical place, not in the way he had known the village or the forest. It was something else, a landscape that seemed to exist on the edge of dream and reality. The colors, Here were deeper, more vibrant, almost alive in their own right. The trees, though twisted and gnarled, glowed with an inner light, their branches reaching out like arms to welcome him, to beckon him forward. There were no distinct boundaries, no clear lines between one thing and another. The sky above was not bound by any familiar shape, and the horizon was indistinct, stretching in every direction, unfurling like a canvas waiting to be painted. Elian felt a wave of awe rush through him as he took it all in. This place was beyond his understanding. The threads that had pulled him here, the ancient force that had guided his every step, were alive in this place, in this moment. It was as though the land itself was breathing with him, its pulse syncing with the rhythm of his heart. He didn't know how long he stood there, drinking in the surreal beauty of the space, the vastness of it. But eventually the pull grew sharper again. The thread, invisible but undeniable, was guiding him deeper into this strange realm, urging him to move forward. Each step he took felt more certain than the last. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the quiet knowledge that he was meant to be here. He had always known that there was more to the world than what his eyes could see, that there were layers to reality that had always existed just beneath the surface. Now, standing in this place, he understood that he was no longer a mere observer. He was a part of this vast, interconnected web of existence. The path he followed led him to a clearing at the center of this strange world, where the light seemed to converge, illuminating the ground in a radiant glow. In the center of the clearing stood another stone, larger than any he had seen before, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with the same energy he had felt since the beginning of his journey. Elian approached the stone, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch its surface. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and the world around him seemed to shift again. The stone vibrated with a deep, resonant hum, its power flowing into him, filling every part of him with a sense of clarity that he had never known before. Memories, sensations, and knowledge flooded his mind, each one clicking into place like pieces of a puzzle. He saw flashes of the world's history, images of distant stars and planets, the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of time itself. He saw his own life, his place in the tapestry of existence, and how everything he had experienced had led him to this moment. And then, like a wave crashing over him, he understood. The thread, the force that had guided him, that had connected him to the world and to all things, was not just a path, it was a purpose. He was meant to be the keeper of the balance, the one who could weave the threads of the world together. He was meant to stand at the intersection of all things and ensure that the harmony was maintained. The knowledge he had gained, the wisdom he had absorbed, was not just for him. It was for everyone, for everything. He was the bridge, the conduit, through which the worlds could be understood and connected. Elian took a deep breath, his fingers still resting on the stone, the power of it thrumming through him. He felt the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as something natural, something he had been prepared for all his life. He was ready. He had always been ready. The stone before him shifted, its surface parting with a soft, melodic sound, revealing a hidden path within it. The path stretched out before him, winding deeper into the unknown, leading towards something even greater than he had imagined. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he felt the pull of the thread urging him onward. With one last glance at the stone, Elian stepped forward, his heart steady, his purpose clear. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun, and as he walked, the path before him seemed to open, unfolding with each step, as if the very world was ready to reveal its secrets to him, one thread at a time. Elian moved forward, the path ahead unfurling with every step he took. The world around him seemed to shift again, the air becoming even more electric with each footfall. It wasn't just the landscape that had changed, it was him too, the thread that connected. Him to all things had grown stronger, more palpable, and he could feel it weaving through him, around him, binding him to the universe itself. The weight of it settled in his chest, not in a burdensome way, but in a way that made everything feel more real, more significant. As he walked, the path began to curve, leading him deeper into the heart of this strange realm. The light here, was softer now, bathed in a perpetual twilight that made the world feel timeless, eternal. The trees that lined the path seemed to bend toward him, their branches reaching out like fingers, as if they too were connected to the same thread that pulled him forward. He reached out a hand instinctively, brushing his fingers against the bark of one of the trees. The moment he did, the tree trembled slightly, as though responding to his touch, and a low hum filled the air, a deep, resonant sound, as though the earth itself was singing. The feeling of connection was overwhelming, and yet it felt right. This was where he was meant to be. This was the culmination of everything, the call he had answered without fully understanding, the thread that had led him through so many moments, each one seemingly ordinary, yet now revealed to be part of something far grander. He didn't know how long he had been walking, but it felt as though time itself had stretched, distorted, as though it had no meaning here. He was no longer bound by the ticking of the clock, the movement of the sun across the sky. The path had its own rhythm, its own pace, and he was following it, step by step, each one carrying him deeper into the unknown. Eventually, the path widened, and Elian found himself standing at the edge of a vast, still lake. The water was dark, almost black, reflecting the soft light of the twilight sky above. In the center of the lake stood a solitary island, its silhouette barely visible in the haze of the evening. The island seemed to beckon to him, its presence, both haunting and inviting. It felt familiar, as though he had seen it in his dreams before, though he had never been here. The pull of the thread was stronger now, urging him toward the water. Without a second thought, Elian stepped forward, the coolness of the air wrapping around him. He was no longer surprised by how natural it felt to follow this pull, to trust it completely. His feet touched the surface of the water, and as they did, the lake seemed to part, creating a narrow path of shimmering stones beneath his feet. Each step was steady, solid, the stones cool against the soles of his feet. As he crossed the water, he could feel the subtle shift in the air, a sense of expectation building around him. The island loomed closer with every step, its shadows growing longer, deeper, and then, as if to guide him, a figure emerged from the mist on the island. The figure was tall, cloaked in robes that seemed to blend seamlessly with the night, their features hidden beneath a hood. It stood at the edge of the island, waiting. Elian's heart beat faster as he approached, the pull of the thread now a quiet hum inside him, urging him toward the figure. He wasn't afraid. In fact, he felt as though he had been expecting this moment, expecting this person. The figure's presence was powerful, but not threatening. It was a presence that promised answers, a presence that seemed to know exactly who he was. When Elian stepped onto the island, the figure finally moved. It raised a hand, gesturing for him to come closer. Elian took a step forward, his breath steady, the pull inside him growing stronger as he reached the figure's side. The figure's eyes were hidden in the shadows of their hood, but there was a depth to their presence, a wisdom that felt ancient. "You've come far," the figure said, their voice soft yet carrying a weight of authority. "But you know that this is not the end, Elian. It is only the beginning." Elian nodded, his throat tight with the weight of their words. He had known that this was never just about finding answers. It was about understanding the path that had been set before him, the role he was meant to play in the great web of the universe. He didn't fully understand it all, not yet, but he could feel the truth of it in his bones. "You are the thread that binds," the figure continued, their voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "You carry the weight of the world's balance, and it is your responsibility to guide it, to protect it. The world does not change with a single action, but with the quiet choices, the subtle movements of the heart." Elian swallowed, taking a deep breath. "What do I do now?" The figure's eyes seemed to gleam beneath the hood, a soft light flickering like stars. "You walk forward. You continue. The path is not set in stone. It shifts with every choice, with every turn. But know this. The world is watching, waiting for you to understand your place in it. You are not just a part of it, Elian. You are the part that will keep it from unraveling." The weight of the figure's words settled heavily on Elian's shoulders, but there was a peace in it too. He wasn't alone in this. He had always known, deep down, that his journey was leading him here, to this moment of understanding, and though it was overwhelming, he knew it was his purpose. He had been chosen for this, and in some quiet part of him, he understood that he would not fail. With a final glance at the figure, Elian turned toward the dark horizon beyond the island. The path was clear now. He would walk it. He had to. And so he stepped forward, the thread pulling him ever onward, knowing that the journey, though vast and uncertain, was his to follow. Each step, each choice, would shape the world. The island behind him faded into the mist as Elian moved further from the shores, the pull of the thread within him still as strong as ever. His steps were steady, though his mind felt restless, caught between the weight of the figure's words and the vast uncertainty of what lay ahead. The path ahead was obscured by shadows, but there was no hesitation in him now. He walked forward with purpose, the quiet hum of his own connection to the universe grounding him, guiding him forward. With each step, the landscape around him seemed to shift, the forest bending and twisting in subtle ways. The trees grew taller, their branches reaching out like hands that guided him along a path he could no longer see, but somehow understood. There was no map for where he was going, no markers, no signs. The path was something that had to be felt, experienced, and Elian knew that this was the nature of the journey. It wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about becoming, about understanding the steps he was meant to take. As the moments passed, the air around him grew cooler, and a mist began to form on the ground, curling up around his feet, like soft tendrils. The silence of the forest grew deeper, more profound, until even the rustling of leaves seemed to cease. It was as though the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for something. Then, without warning, a sound broke through the stillness, a low, mournful cry that echoed through the air. Elian paused, his breath caught in his throat, and, for a brief moment, the world around him seemed to still once again. The sound had come from deep within the mist, from a place he could not see but could feel pulling at him. It was both familiar and foreign, a sound that resonated deep within him, stirring something old, something buried. He took a cautious step forward, the mist curling around his legs as though trying to draw him in, urging him toward whatever lay ahead. The cry came again, this time more distinct. It was a voice, no many voices layered together in a haunting chorus. They were soft, but their resonance filled the air with a kind of sadness that made his chest tighten. The thread tugged at him, again this time with an urgency that felt different, more insistent. It was as if the world were calling him, as though the very fabric of the universe were reaching out to pull him towards something he needed to face. He didn't know what it was, but he knew he couldn't turn back. He moved forward into the mist, the fog growing thicker around him with each step until the path seemed to vanish completely. His senses sharpened, his heart quickening as he strained to make out the shapes around him, but all he could see was the swirling mist. Yet the pull was unmistakable, clearer now, guiding him to the source of the sound. And then, through the mist, a figure emerged. It was a woman, or at least, a figure that appeared to be a woman. She stood tall, cloaked in the same mist that surrounded them, her features indistinct, blurred by the fog. The moment Elian saw her, he felt the world shift again, as though something deep within him recognized her, even if he couldn't explain why. The woman didn't move. She simply stood there, her head tilted slightly to one side, as though waiting for him to approach. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy, the quiet tension of something ancient, something that had always been, stretching out between them. "Who are you?" Elian found himself asking, his voice barely more than a whisper, though the mist swallowed the sound as soon as it left his lips. The woman's lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, the voices, the ones that had cried out earlier, echoed, in his mind, a chorus of whispers that flooded his thoughts. The whispers spoke of the past, of memories he couldn't place, of things he hadn't experienced but somehow knew. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they brushed against the mist that seemed to surround her. The moment his skin made contact with the air, the mist seemed to part, revealing more of her form. Her eyes glowed softly, an unnatural light emanating from within, and her voice, when it came, was a soft, ethereal sound, like a breeze moving through the trees. "You are ready," she said, her voice both comforting and filled with an ancient sorrow. "But you must understand, Elian, that this path is not without its cost. The thread you carry is not just a gift, it is a responsibility, a burden that must be borne with the weight of the world upon your shoulders. Elian stood motionless, every word sinking into his mind like stones in water, ripples spreading out as they settled deep within him. "What is it I must do?" he asked, his voice steadier now, as though he were no longer speaking to her but to the thread itself, the force that had brought him here. The woman's eyes flickered, the glow within them flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. "You must choose, Elian. The thread that binds you to the worlds, to all things, will unravel if not properly tended. The path you walk will change the fabric of the universe, but the choices you make will decide whether it mends or tears." Her words hung in the air like smoke, curling around him, filling his mind with questions, with confusion. There were no answers, only the weight of her words and the silent, unyielding pull of the thread. "You must walk forward," she continued, her form beginning to fade back into the mist. "And when the time comes, you will know what must be done. Trust in the thread, in the path, and in yourself." And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the woman vanished into the fog, leaving Elian standing alone, the chorus of voices still echoing in his mind. The mist began to dissipate slowly, the path ahead now clear, the weight of the decision before him settling in like the stillness of the night. Elian took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had come this far. There was no turning back. He was the thread that connected everything, and now he had to learn what it meant to carry that weight. The pull grew stronger again, urging him forward, guiding him into the unknown. The fog had all but cleared when Elian began to walk again, his heart heavy with the weight of the woman's words. The pull of the thread inside him had not lessened. If anything, it had only intensified. It was no longer just a soft tug, but a strong, constant force that guided him through the vast unknown landscape. He didn't know where he was going, but with each step he felt closer to something both terrifying and inevitable. He walked without question, though the confusion of her words still echoed in his mind. "The thread will unravel if not properly tended," the woman had said, and that warning had stayed with him, clinging to his thoughts like the last remnants of the mist. What did it mean? What could he do? The enormity of what he was meant to carry felt so heavy now. He had known for some time that this journey was not just about discovering who he was, but about shaping the world around him. Yet how could he, a single person, have the power to affect so much? How could his steps possibly matter in a universe that was so vast, so unyielding? The path in front of him seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning through the vast landscape, leading him to places he could not yet comprehend. The trees that had once felt like comforting guides now loomed larger, their branches reaching for him as though to stop him, to test his resolve. And in the distance, the land began to change again, shifting like sand beneath his feet, each step bringing him closer to something greater, something far beyond his understanding. And yet, there was no stopping. The thread pulled at him, steady and unwavering, as if it knew the way even when he didn't. A soft, distant rumble interrupted his thoughts, and the ground beneath his feet trembled ever so slightly. The air grew heavy again, and a subtle sense of danger began to creep into the atmosphere. The world, which had seemed so peaceful and inviting, now felt charged with a quiet anticipation, as though something was drawing near. The rumbling grew, louder, the vibrations in the earth beneath him more pronounced. It wasn't the kind of tremor he had felt before. This one felt like the land itself was stirring, waking from a long slumber. The thread within him tugged again, harder now, as though urging him to move faster. He broke into a run, the world blurring around him as he followed the path that seemed to open before him with every stride. The ground underfoot seemed to shift and ripple, as though the very landscape was rearranging itself with every step. He didn't know how much time had passed, only that he was running toward something, toward the source of the pull, toward the unknown. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the rumbling stopped. The air stilled, and the earth beneath his feet was solid again. The world around him seemed to fall into a strange, quiet calm, and he slowed to a halt, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He stood in the center of a new clearing. The trees, which had once been so numerous, were now sparse, and the landscape before him seemed open, vast, almost infinite. In the distance, there was a faint glow, a soft light, that pulsed with the rhythm of the thread itself. His heart beat faster as he realized it was the source, the culmination of his journey. The pull was now nearly overwhelming, and he could feel it pushing him forward, guiding him toward the light. There were no more doubts, no more hesitation. The path had led him here, and this was where everything would be decided. Elian took a deep breath and stepped forward, the light growing brighter with every step. The landscape shifted again as he moved, the trees parting to reveal more of the glowing path ahead, and the air around him hummed with a deep, resonant energy. The light pulsed like a heartbeat calling to him, wrapping around him like a cloak. As he neared the center of the glow, he saw it, an enormous stone structure, standing alone in the middle of the clearing. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The stone was smooth, polished, glowing faintly with the same light that had pulled him here. It seemed to pulse with the same energy that flowed through him, as though it too was a part of the thread. A part of the fabric of the universe. The light from the stone was blinding now, yet it didn't hurt. It was warm, inviting, and it called to him with a quiet urgency. He could feel the weight of it, the power it held, and his hand instinctively reached out toward it. The moment his fingers brushed against the surface of the stone, a surge of energy coursed through him, more powerful than anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the entire universe was flooding through him, pouring into his very being, filling every inch of him with light and understanding. He saw everything in that instant, the thread that bound all things, the delicate balance between the seen and unseen, the interconnectedness of the world and everything in it. He understood then, in that one moment of clarity, what he had to do. He was the thread, but he was also the keeper of it. He had been chosen not just to follow the path, but to ensure that it remained intact, that the balance of the world was maintained. The light around him began to fade, but the knowledge, the understanding stayed. It was a part of him now, woven into the very fabric of his being. He wasn't alone anymore. He was one with the thread, with the land, with everything. The stone before him pulsed one last time, and the glow dimmed, leaving him standing alone in the quiet clearing. But he was no longer uncertain, no longer lost. He understood his place in the world now. The weight of the responsibility didn't scare him. It was his, and it was right. The pull of the thread was still there, but it wasn't guiding him blindly anymore. It was a part of him, and he was ready to walk the path, whatever it held, because now he understood. And with that understanding, Elian began to walk forward again, each step filled with the knowledge that he was not just part of the world, but the one who would ensure it remained whole. Elian's steps were steady, unwavering, the clarity within him as sharp as the stillness around him. The glow from the stone had faded, but the understanding it had granted him lingered, woven deep into his mind and soul. The path ahead was not just a series of physical steps. It was a journey of purpose, of becoming, and he knew, without doubt, that it was one he was meant to walk. The landscape before him shifted again, as if the world itself were adjusting to his newfound understanding. The air had grown warmer, filled with a kind of still energy, the kind that precedes something significant, something that must happen. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a quiet, magnetic force that pulled at him from all directions. It was the thread. It was always the thread. He walked through the clearing, the ground beneath him solid, yet somehow responsive, as though it was aware of his every move. The trees on the edges of the path, once distant and foreign, now seemed like old friends, watching over him as he continued his journey. Each branch seemed to sway in rhythm with his thoughts, each leaf shimmering faintly in the soft light that filtered through the canopy above. Though the landscape remained unchanged in its beauty, the feeling in the air was different now. The weight of the responsibility, the understanding of what he was meant to do, was not oppressive but empowering. His role was clear. He had always been a part of the world, but now he was tied to it in a way he could never have imagined. He was a keeper, a protector of the thread that connected everything, that wove together the vast and intricate web of existence. As he walked, Elian began to sense the shift in the atmosphere, the subtle change that signified the presence of something else, something new. It wasn't a physical presence, but rather an energy in the air, a soft underlying hum that seemed to vibrate with the pulse of the earth itself. The thread was guiding him to something, and he could feel it now, clearer than ever before. He paused at the edge of another clearing, the air around him thick with the quiet hum of something unseen. The trees parted slightly, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the forest, toward a place that felt both familiar and foreign, like a distant memory or a dream yet to be realized. The pull of the thread was stronger here, tugging at him with an intensity that matched the growing awareness within him. Elian took a deep breath, his heart steady, his mind calm. There was no turning back. This was the next step, the moment that would define the path forward. Without hesitation, he stepped into the passage, the air around him growing thicker, more charged with the unseen energy that surrounded him. The world around him seemed to blur, as though time itself had stretched and bent, folding into itself as he walked deeper into the unknown. The path ahead was shrouded in a gentle mist, the ground soft beneath his feet, and the trees that lined the way seemed to lean inward, as though drawing him toward the heart of the forest. It felt like a place between worlds, a space where the boundaries of reality were thin, where the thread that bound all things was strongest. As he walked, the mist began to clear, and in the distance he saw a light, a soft, glowing warmth that beckoned him forward. The thread tugged him toward it with quiet insistence, and he knew that this light was the key to understanding, the final piece to the puzzle that had unfolded before him. The closer he came to the light, the more intense. The hum of the thread became resonating through him, filling his senses with an overwhelming sense of unity. The world around him seemed to pulse with life, each beat matching the rhythm of his heart, and he knew without a doubt that he was walking the path that had always been meant for him. As he stepped into the light, the world around him shifted again, this time more profoundly. The trees, the mist, the ground beneath his feet, all of it seemed to melt away, leaving him standing in a vast empty space, a place that felt like both the beginning and the end of everything. The light here was different from the soft glow he had seen before. It was brighter, sharper, almost blinding, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like the very essence of the universe itself, a force of creation and destruction, of life and death, all at once. In the center of this space, there was another figure. No, not a figure, but a presence, an energy that filled the air. It was the source of the light, and as Elian approached, he could feel its immense power, its ancient wisdom, settling over him like a blanket. This was the heart of the thread, the origin of everything he had been drawn toward. "You've come." The presence spoke, its voice neither male nor female, but both and neither. It was not a sound, but a vibration, a sensation that filled the air and his very being. "You've walked the path and answered the call. Now you understand." Elian nodded, his throat tight with the weight of its words. "I understand my place," he said, the words feeling strange on his tongue, though they were true. "I am the thread." The presence seemed to shimmer, as if acknowledging his words. "You are, indeed, the thread that binds all things, the keeper of balance, the protector of harmony. But understand this, Elian, you are not the only one who walks the thread. There are others who will try to unravel it." Elian's heart stilled at the words. "Who are they?" "They are the forces that seek to tear the world apart," the presence explained, its voice growing softer. "They seek to break the connection, to shatter the balance. But you are not alone. You will find allies, but the path will not be easy." The weight of the responsibility settled heavier on Elian's shoulders, but there was no fear in him. There was only determination, the quiet strength of someone who knew they had a purpose, even if the path ahead was uncertain. "What must I do?" Elian asked, his voice steady, filled with resolve. The presence was silent for a long moment, and then, in a voice that was both gentle and commanding, it spoke. "You must protect the thread. You must ensure it does not unravel, for if it does, the worlds will fall into chaos. The balance must be maintained no matter the cost. Elian nodded, understanding now what he had to do. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was his to walk. He was the thread, the keeper of balance, and he would do whatever it took to protect the harmony of the world. With a final glance at the light, Elian turned and began to walk again, the pull of the thread guiding him, the weight of his purpose clear in his heart. He was ready. The journey had just begun. The landscape began to shift once again, as Elian moved away from the intense, blinding light that had enveloped him. Though the vast space had felt limitless, like the entire universe had stretched open to reveal itself, it now seemed to close in around him, the world reshaping into something more tangible, more grounded. The pull of the thread remained a constant, a force he could no longer ignore, though it had settled into something softer, more familiar. It was as though he had reached a point of understanding that made the next step feel inevitable. He walked forward, though the path was no longer clearly defined. Instead, it felt like the world was shifting, adapting to his every move, as though the landscape itself were waiting for his guidance. The air was thick with the energy he had encountered earlier, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Now it was part of him, woven into the very fabric of his being. As Elian moved, he could feel the connection between himself and the land around him growing stronger. The thread he carried stretched, pulled, and tied him to everything: the trees, the soil, the sky. And yet there was something more, something that beckoned to him from beyond the visible world. The pull grew once more, this time not in one direction, but all around him, as though the very air was alive with movement, urging him toward something specific. It wasn't a place he could see with his eyes, but something within him understood it. It was as if the universe itself had aligned with him, waiting for him to make his next choice. Elian slowed, feeling the weight of it, the enormity of the responsibility that had been placed upon him. The balance, the thread, the choice, it was all his now. He could feel the depth of it in his chest, as though he were a vessel for something far greater than he could fully comprehend. But still, the certainty of his purpose remained. He was the keeper of the thread. He was the one who would ensure that the worlds, that everything remained in balance. A rustling sound broke the silence, and Elian turned sharply, his senses on high alert. Through the trees he saw something moving, figures, shadows, not human but shaped by something else. The thread within him pulsed, and he instinctively stepped forward, not in fear, but in understanding. He had walked this path, followed this thread, but the time had come for him to face what he had been prepared for. The figures emerged from the shadows, their forms still indistinct, yet there was no mistaking the sense of power they carried. They moved with purpose, their eyes glowing faintly as they watched him approach. The pull of the thread was different now. It wasn't guiding him, it was challenging him. These figures were a test, a trial that he must face. They stopped in front of him, the energy around them thickening with the same weight he had felt earlier, only this time it was sharper, more intense. The air seemed to crackle with the force of it. One of the figures stepped forward, its movements fluid, unnatural. The figure's face remained hidden beneath a cloak of shadow, but its presence was undeniable. "How you have come far," the figure's voice echoed, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through Elian's chest. "But you are not the only one who walks the thread." Elian stood tall, unshaken by the intensity of their gaze, though he could feel the weight of their words pressing on him. "I know," he replied, his voice steady, "but I will protect it. I will protect the balance." The figure let out a low, almost amused sound, as if considering his words. "The balance?" it repeated. "Do you understand what that truly means? You are the keeper of it, but the thread, it is not so easily held." Elian felt a flicker of doubt, but it was fleeting. "I understand. I will not let it unravel." The figure's eyes glowed brighter, its energy intensifying. "You say that now, but the thread has its own way. It will test you, Elian. It will pull at you, stretch you to your limits, and you will be forced to choose, to sacrifice." The words hit him like a storm, a sudden rush of wind that threatened to knock him off balance. Sacrifice? What was he willing to give? What was the cost of holding the thread, of keeping the balance? "I will choose," Elian said, his voice unwavering. "I will do whatever it takes. The figure stood silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly, almost approvingly. "Very well, but remember, the thread doesn't bind only you, it binds everything, and everything has a price." The other figures, who had remained silent, now stepped forward. Their movements synchronized as if they were part of the same force, part of the same will. One of them raised a hand, and the mist around them thickened, swirling as though reacting. To the figure's command, Elian's heart quickened, but the pull within him remained strong. The thread had always been with him, and it would always guide him. He reached out with a steady hand, feeling the force of it gather within him, surrounding him like a second skin. The power of the thread surged, filling him with a sense of clarity, a quiet knowing that he was not alone in this. The figures stepped back, their forms dissolving into the mist as if they were never really there, leaving Elian standing alone once again. The air settled, the weight of the encounter still hanging in the space between him and the forest. The pull of the thread, however, was unyielding. It called him forward, deeper into the unknown, toward whatever lay next on the path. He took a deep breath, his resolve firming in his chest. He would face whatever came next. The balance would be preserved, the thread would not break, and so with that steady, unshakable purpose, Elian continued forward, his journey far from over, the path ahead filled with both uncertainty and the quiet promise of what he was meant to become. The forest around him began to quiet, the whisper of the wind settling into a soft hum, as if the trees themselves were listening, waiting. Elian's mind raced, but his footsteps remained steady. The figures had vanished, their presence leaving a heavy, lingering question in the air. Sacrifice. The word echoed in his mind, its meaning elusive, like a shadow on the edge of his thoughts. What would he be asked to give? What price would he pay for the balance he was sworn to protect? The path ahead was still not clear, and the thread that had once pulled him so urgently was now a steady current within him, guiding but no longer forcing. Each step he took felt like part of something larger, something that was moving not just through the forest but through him, weaving him into the world in ways he could never fully explain. The landscape shifted again, the trees thinning as he entered another clearing, this one even more open than the last. The air here felt different, charged with an energy he couldn't quite grasp. It wasn't oppressive, but it was unmistakable, like the calm before a storm. He continued forward, his heart quickening, though his breath remained calm. The pull within him grew stronger, this time tugging him toward something more specific, something he could not yet see but felt as clearly as if it were already before him. He knew, without understanding how, that he had to move forward, that whatever he would face next was the next part of his journey. As he approached the center of the clearing, the mist thickened once again, wrapping around his feet like fingers curling into the earth. The light from the sky dimmed, the stars above, obscured by the growing fog. He paused, feeling a strange tension fill the air, a pressure that made every sound, every movement feel amplified. And then, in the distance, he saw it. A flicker of light, faint at first, but growing brighter with each passing second. It wasn't the soft, ethereal glow he had seen before. This light was different, sharp and urgent, a beacon in the growing darkness. It pulled at him, the thread tightening in response, urging him to step closer. He moved toward it, the mist parting as though the path were clearing for him, leading him to the source of the light. The closer he got, the more intense the feeling grew, like a presence, not just a physical light, but something alive, something that held the answer to the questions that had plagued him since the beginning of this journey. Finally, he stepped into the center of the light, and for a moment everything went still. The world around him vanished into pure whiteness, and he was enveloped in a soft glow that seemed to wrap around him like the very fabric of the universe itself. He stood there for what felt like eternity, the pull of the thread at its peak, almost overwhelming in its intensity. Then slowly the light dimmed, revealing a figure standing before him. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood, but there was no mistaking the power that radiated from it, the same power that had filled the air since he first set foot in this strange realm. "You have come," the figure's voice resonated, both soft and thunderous like a storm in the distance. But do you understand what you seek, Elian? Elian's heart raced, the question catching him off guard. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before responding. I understand that I must protect the balance. I am the keeper of the thread, and I must ensure it does not unravel. The figure tilted its head slightly as though considering his words. Yes, but that is not the only burden you carry, it said. The thread connects all things, but it also divides. And when you walk this path, you will be forced to choose. There will be moments when you must decide what is worth protecting and what must be let go. Elian's mind raced, the weight of its words sinking in. What must I let go? The figure stepped closer, the shadows around it shifting with its movement. That is for you to decide, Ma, it said softly. The thread connects the past, present, and future. It binds you to all things. But there are those who seek to sever it, to unravel what has been woven. You must understand that not everything is meant to endure. There are forces, shadows in the world, that seek to destroy what holds everything together. And you will face them, but you must choose which threads to hold and which to release. Elian swallowed, the enormity of the figure's words washing over him. His journey had been about understanding the thread, but now it was about something, more deciding what was worth the sacrifice, what had to be protected and what must be let go. I will protect the balance, he said, though his voice wavered slightly. I will protect what I must. The figure's form shimmered, and for a brief moment it seemed to fade into the light, becoming one with the glowing force that surrounded him. The air hummed with a deep, resonant energy, and Elian felt the pull of the thread settle within him, now a part of him, inseparable and steady. Then you are ready, the figure's voice echoed one last time. The thread will guide you, but remember, Elian, every choice you make will shape the world, and when the time comes, you will know what to do. The figure dissolved into the light, leaving Elian standing alone once more, the clarity of his purpose stronger than ever. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything, the responsibility, the power, the understanding, settle into him. He had been chosen to protect the balance, to carry the thread. But the path was not clear. There were choices ahead, and he would have to face them, not with fear, but with the knowledge that he was ready. The world around him shifted once again, the mist lifting, the path ahead clearer. The light that had enveloped him began to fade, but it was not gone. It remained within him, a constant guide. And as he began to walk again, the thread pulled him forward, toward the unknown, toward the next challenge he must face. But this time, he knew he was not walking alone. Elian's steps grew more deliberate as he continued through the mist, the pull of the thread now a steady hum within him, a constant guide. The landscape around him shifted once again, the path ahead unfolding without warning, as though the world itself were anticipating his every move. His senses were heightened now, each sound in the air more vivid, the rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds seeming to resonate through him. The very earth beneath his feet seemed to pulse in time with his heart, as though it too was alive, waiting for him to make his next decision. The choices, the weight of them, lingered in his mind like a shadow. The figure's words had left, their mark, their significance still echoing through him. He was the keeper of the balance, but that did not mean the world would allow him to keep it without challenge. The thread that connected all things, everything he had come to understand, wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility, one that could unravel if not tended carefully. And the choice between holding tight and letting go, that was something he had yet to fully grasp. He moved deeper into the shifting landscape, the fog thinning around him and the sounds of the forest growing quieter. There was an eerie stillness now, a kind of anticipation that filled the air, pressing in on him as he walked. It was as if the very world were holding its breath, waiting for him to take the next step, to act on the knowledge he had gathered. Then, in the distance, a flicker of light appeared again. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, but as he moved forward, it grew clearer, more defined. It was a soft glow like the light of distant stars, and it beckoned him forward with the same quiet insistence the thread had always had. The closer he came, the more he could feel the energy around it. vibrating with the same force he had felt at the stone and the arch, the same power that had guided him since the beginning of his journey. This light was different, though. It didn't just pull at him, it seemed to wrap around him, urging him to come closer. He didn't hesitate. His feet carried him forward, drawn to the light like a magnet, each step quicker than the last, until he emerged into another clearing. The light here was no longer faint but bright, almost blinding. It filled the space with a warm golden glow, and at its center stood another figure. This one was not cloaked in shadow like the others, but bathed in the light itself, its form, luminous, its features hidden beneath the soft radiance that surrounded it. Elian stopped a few paces away, the pull within him stronger than ever. The figure's presence was overwhelming, yet somehow familiar, as if he had known it long before this moment. The thread, still alive within him, thrummed, stretching toward the light, urging him closer. "You have come," the figure's voice spoke, its tone soft but carrying an immense weight, as though it came from deep within the earth itself. "You walk the path, Elian, but now you must understand what it means." Elian swallowed, his heart quickening. "What must I understand?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. It was the same question he had been asking himself since the beginning of this journey. What must I do? The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering him. "You have felt the thread. You have followed its pull, and now you must see it for what it truly is. It is not just a force that connects the world, it is the world itself. It is everything, Elian. It is life and death, growth and decay, creation and destruction. The thread is woven through the fabric of time and space, and you are the keeper of it. But understand this, everything that exists has a price. The balance that you protect will require something from you. What you must give and what you must let go of is yet to be seen." Elian's throat tightened at the words, a sense of unease settling in his chest. "What price?" he whispered. "What must I sacrifice?" The figure's voice softened, as if recognizing the weight of his question. "The thread requires balance, Elian. But balance is not the same for all. For you to protect one thing, another must be left behind. For all things to remain in harmony, something must change. You will be asked to choose. What will you protect and what will you let go of?" The silence that followed was thick, and Elian could feel his pulse quicken in his veins. His chest tightened with a mixture of fear and determination. The thread was his responsibility, but now the magnitude of that responsibility was becoming clearer. He was the keeper, yes, but he was also the one who would have to make the decisions, the sacrifices, the choices that would shape the future. And in the back of his mind, a part of him feared that the cost would be too great. The figure seemed to sense his hesitation. "Do not be afraid, Elian. The thread will not lead you astray. It will guide you, but you must be willing to listen, to understand that the price of balance is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. Only then will you truly protect the world you are meant to guide." A weight settled heavily on Elian's shoulders. He understood, but understanding didn't make it any easier. What would he have to give up to preserve the balance? The question loomed before him, stretching out like an abyss, and yet he knew there was no turning back. He had come this far. The thread was his burden to carry, and he would carry it to the end, whatever it cost. The figure before him faded slowly, the light dimming as it dissolved into the air, leaving Elian standing alone in the clearing. The hum of the thread remained, but now it felt different. It wasn't just a call, it was a responsibility, a weight that pressed into him with every beat of his heart. Elian stood there for a long time, the weight of the choice before him settling into the pit of his stomach. There was no way forward without sacrifice. The path ahead was not just about protecting the balance, it was about deciding what that balance meant and how far he was willing to go to maintain it. And as the light of the clearing faded into the darkness, Elian knew that whatever came next, he was ready. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Elian stood motionless in the fading light, the weight of the figure's words settling around him like a heavy mist. The choice, the sacrifice. It was clear now that the thread was not just something to be carried. It was something to be shaped, molded with the decisions he made, each step a potential fork in the road that would alter the course of everything. The cost of balance. What would he have to give up? What was worth protecting? The figure before him faded slowly, the light dimming as it dissolved into the air, leaving Elian standing alone in the clearing. The hum of the thread remained, but now it felt different. It wasn't just a call, it was a responsibility, a weight that pressed into him with every beat of his heart. Elian stood there for a long time, the weight of the choice before him settling into the pit of his stomach. There was no way forward without sacrifice. The path ahead was not just about protecting the balance, it was about deciding what that balance meant, and how far he was willing to go to maintain it. And as the light of the clearing faded into the darkness, Elian knew that whatever came, next he was ready. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Elian stood motionless in the fading light, the weight of the figure's words settling around him like a heavy mist. The choice, the sacrifice. It was clear now that the thread was not just something to be carried, it was something to be shaped, molded with the decisions he made. Each step a potential fork in the road that would alter the course of everything. The cost of balance. What would he have to give up? What was worth protecting? He took a deep breath. The air still thick with the energy that had swirled around him, though now it was quieter, almost expectant, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. The light around the clearing had dimmed almost entirely, leaving only the soft glow of the moon to light his path. The night felt different now, heavier with meaning, as though the very fabric of the universe was watching him, urging him forward. The pull of the thread remained, still there, still guiding him, but now it was not just a force pulling him from behind. It was a steady, constant presence within him, urging him to understand, to choose. Elian knew, with every fiber of his being, that his next step would shape everything. This was the moment that would define the path ahead. He turned. From the clearing, the path ahead stretching out before him once again, and yet for the first time, he wasn't merely walking forward, he was choosing. Each step now a deliberate movement toward something unknown, something both exhilarating and terrifying. As he moved deeper into the forest, the trees began to thin once more, revealing a vast expanse ahead. The air had changed, again lighter now, like the space he was entering was not bound by the same rules as the world behind him. There was a strange familiarity to it, but also a sense of distance, as if he was stepping into something new, a place untouched by time, waiting for him to make his mark. The pull of the thread was stronger now, more insistent, guiding him toward the center of this strange realm. It felt like an invitation, one he had no choice but to accept. With every step, his understanding deepened, though the weight of it still lingered in the back of his mind. He wasn't just carrying the thread anymore, he was becoming a part of it, woven into the very fabric of everything that surrounded him. The ground beneath him began to change again, the soil turning soft and pliable beneath his feet. It was as though the earth itself was responding to his presence, reacting to the weight of his decisions. He could feel the energy in the air, vibrating with the pulse of the world, guiding him deeper into the heart of whatever awaited him. Ahead, there, was a shift in the landscape. The trees gave way to a large open space, bathed in the soft glow of an ethereal light. In the center of the clearing stood a structure, unlike anything Elian had seen before. It was both ancient and otherworldly, its surface smooth and shimmering, glowing faintly in the darkness. The light emanated from it, casting soft shadows across the ground, drawing him forward. He approached slowly, his heart racing in his chest, the pull of the thread stronger with each step. The structure stood, silent and still, its presence commanding as though it had been waiting for him. Elian's fingers tingled, the thread thrumming within him, urging him to touch it, to connect with it. When he reached the base of the structure, he could feel the energy within it, pulsing in time with his own heartbeat. His hand moved instinctively, reaching out toward the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of power rushed through him, filling him with a sudden clarity, a deep understanding that was both overwhelming and soothing. It was as though he had unlocked something hidden within himself, a part of the world that had always been there, waiting for him to see it. The structure seemed to respond to his touch, the surface rippling like water, and as it did, the light around him intensified, filling the entire space with a brilliant glow. For a moment, Elian was engulfed in light, and in that moment, he understood. The thread wasn't just a connection, it was a bridge, a way of moving through time and space, of connecting not just to the world, but to the very essence of existence itself. It was a part of him, as much as he was a part of it. But even as the understanding settled over him, the weight of the figure's words still lingered in his mind. You must choose what to protect and what to let go. The clarity he had gained did not offer simple answers. It only deepened the complexity of the choices that lay before him. The light around him began to fade, and as it did, the structure's surface settled, becoming still once again. Elian took a step back, his mind racing with the enormity of what he had just experienced. The thread had connected him to something far greater than he had ever imagined. But now, more than ever, he knew that the path ahead was not just about following that thread. It was about choosing how to shape it. How? To protect the balance. He turned away from the structure, the world around him now quieter, the path ahead still uncertain. The thread pulled at him once again, but now it was different. It wasn't just a force guiding him forward. It was a responsibility, one he would carry with him through whatever lay ahead. The forest around him began to shift again, the landscape responding to the energy within him. With each step, Elian felt the weight of the world pressing in on him, but it wasn't a burden. It was a purpose. He was the keeper, the protector of the thread. And though the path ahead was unclear, he knew he was ready to face whatever came next. With that knowledge, he walked forward into the unknown, the thread guiding him, the balance within him, and the future unfolding one step at a time. The path ahead felt different now. Each step Elian took carried him deeper into the unknown, but the weight of his understanding stayed with him, steady and grounding. The thread pulsed faintly within him, the connection to everything around him still strong, guiding him without words, without explanation. He could feel it, that delicate balance, a soft hum beneath his skin, like a song that had been playing all along, just out of reach, now resonating within him. The landscape around him had changed again. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisting in strange, spiraling patterns. The light had dimmed, replaced by a twilight that bathed the world in a muted, golden hue. Everything here felt in between, neither night nor day, neither light nor dark. It was as though he had entered a space outside of time, a place where the rules of the world didn't quite apply. There were no clear boundaries, only the endless stretch of the path drawing him forward. But even in this strange, liminal space, Elian felt the pull, the thread still there, guiding him. It was both comforting and unsettling, a constant reminder that his role was greater than just following the path. He was meant to shape it, to weave it, to ensure that the balance was maintained. He paused for a moment, the sounds of the forest around him filling the air, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant calls of unseen creatures. But beneath those sounds there was something else, a soft whisper like a breeze carrying a message just out of reach. It wasn't a voice he could hear with his ears, but something he felt in the pit of his stomach, a deep, resonant hum that matched the pulse of the thread. The whisper grew louder, closer, though it didn't seem to come from any one direction. It was all around him, as if the very air was speaking. "You are not alone," it whispered. "The thread weaves through all things, but others walk it as well. They, too, will choose." Elian's heart skipped a beat. He had felt it before. That presence, that knowing, that there were others. Others who were walking the thread just as he was, and who, like him, would have to make their own choices. Who were they, he wondered? What path had they chosen? His hand instinctively reached for the thread within him, feeling its quiet force, its steady pull. It was clear now. He wasn't just one part of a larger whole. He was the part that would either preserve the balance or see it shattered. But what did that mean? What did it truly mean to protect the thread when others might choose to tear it apart? The mist ahead began to swirl, shifting in patterns that seemed to follow the rhythm of the whisper. He stepped forward, the pull guiding him, drawing him, toward something just beyond his reach. The path in front of him was changing again, narrowing as the trees pressed in closer, the space around him growing tighter. There was no going back, no turning away now. He had come too far, and the choices ahead could not be avoided. The air thickened with anticipation, and as he continued forward, he saw it, something in the distance, emerging from the mist. A figure, cloaked in shadow, standing at the edge of the path. The figure's presence was undeniable, like a shadow cast over the landscape, drawing all light to it. Elian's heart raced. This was no ordinary encounter. He could feel it in the thread, in the pull within him, that this was the moment he had been preparing for. The figure did not move, but Elian could sense its awareness, its gaze, though he couldn't see its eyes. He could feel them on him, watching, waiting. He stopped a few paces away, his breath steadying, his mind focused. The figure did not speak at first. Instead, the air around them seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, the mist swirling and dancing in response to its presence. Finally, the figure's voice broke the silence, low and resonant, filling the space between them. "So, you have come," it said, its tone both familiar and foreign. "The thread calls and you answer. But you must understand this. There are many threads in the world, and not all of them are meant to be preserved." Elian stood firm, his heart pounding, but he did not speak. The pull of the thread within him was growing stronger, as if the very energy of the figure was drawing it out. He could feel it, the conflict, the choice that would soon unfold. "You carry the weight of the world, Elian," the figure continued, its voice unwavering. "But what will you do when you must choose between saving it and letting it go?" The question hung in the air, thick with meaning. Elian's mind spun, trying to grasp the true meaning of its words. He had always known that the thread was a force for balance, for connection. But what if that balance required something more than just preservation? What if it required destruction? "You speak of sacrifice," Elian said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "But what is worth sacrificing? What can I let go of to keep the balance?" The figure's presence seemed to intensify, the energy around it crackling with unseen power. "That is your choice to make," it said. "The world is full of threads, all connected, all woven together. But there are some that must be cut, some that must unravel." Elian felt the weight of its words, the significance of the moment pressing down on him. He was the keeper of the thread, but the thread was not invincible. It was fragile, and to protect the balance, he would have to understand when it was time to cut, to let go. The figure stepped back, fading into the mist once again. Its voice lingered, a whisper in the wind. "You will know when the time comes, you will feel it in the thread. But remember, Elian, everything comes at a price." As the figure vanished, the mist began to clear, the path ahead becoming visible once more. Elian stood in the silence, his thoughts racing. He understood now with a clarity that had not been present before. The balance he was meant to protect was not static. It was not something that could simply be preserved. It was dynamic, shifting. And it required more than just action. It required discernment, wisdom, and sacrifice. And as the pull of the thread tugged at him once more, Elian took a deep breath and stepped forward, his path clearer than ever before. The journey was far from over, but now he understood that the choices he would make were as important as the steps he took. The path stretched out before Elian, but the weight of the choices that lay ahead hung in the air, thick and undeniable. The figure's words echoed in his mind, haunting yet clarifying. Some threads must unravel. What did that mean? What would he have to sacrifice in order to preserve the balance? The pull of the thread was still there, still guiding him forward. But it was no longer a gentle tug. It was insistent now, more demanding, as though the universe itself was urging him to make a decision. Every step he took felt heavier, but there was no turning back. He had come too far, and the world needed him to understand his place in it, to decide which threads were worth holding on to and which were not. The landscape around him continued to shift, the trees thinning as he moved deeper into the unknown. The air grew colder, the mist swirling around him once again, though this time it didn't feel like a veil hiding the path. It felt like a challenge. The fog was alive, responding to him, guiding him, but also testing him, pushing him to question everything he had come to know. As he walked, the trees around him grew darker, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes, and the ground beneath. His feet became uneven, as though the very earth was shifting beneath him, questioning his every move. The thread inside him pulsed with each step, the rhythm of it steady but urgent like a heartbeat in his chest. The further he moved, the more the tension in the air thickened. The pull, once clear and guiding, now felt fraught with uncertainty. Each choice he had made had led him to this point, but what would he do now that he understood the weight of his responsibility? The mist parted ahead, revealing a new clearing. This one was different from all the others, quieter, darker, as if the very air here had grown stagnant, holding its breath. In the center of the clearing was a stone, similar to the one he had touched before, but much larger, ancient and worn, with time. The markings on it were different too, deeper, more complex, as though they had been carved by hands long gone, telling a story only those who truly understood could decipher. He approached the stone slowly, feeling the pull of the thread grow sharper like a pressure in his chest. This was it. This was the moment of choice, the moment where he would have to decide whether to unravel what had been woven or to weave a new path entirely. The thread was both a gift and a burden. He understood that now. But what was he willing to do to protect it? He reached out, his fingers brushing against the stone's surface. The moment he made contact, the world seemed to shift again, and a surge of energy rushed through him. The markings on the stone began to glow, their patterns shifting and changing, flowing like a river of light, revealing images, memories, things he had not yet seen. He saw flashes of his journey, his first steps on the path, the encounters with the figures, the moments of uncertainty. But then the images changed, revealing something else. Images of people, of worlds, of lives intertwined in ways he had never imagined. He saw the balance of all things, the delicate threads that connected every living being, every moment, every choice. And he saw the unraveling of those threads, the destruction that could come from a single wrong choice. The vision blurred, and Elian's heart pounded in his chest. This is what I must protect, he thought. This is the balance, the thread that binds all things, but there was more. He saw himself standing at the center of it all, holding the thread, but also holding the weight of the destruction it could cause. He saw the consequences of holding onto the thread too tightly, of protecting it at all costs. It wasn't just about the balance of the world. It was about understanding the cost of that balance, the sacrifices that would have to be made. The vision shifted again, showing a future where the thread was severed, where the worlds fractured, where chaos reigned. And he knew, deep in his bones, that it was a future he could not allow. I must protect it, he thought. I must make the right choice. The images faded, and Elian stood alone once more, his fingers still resting against the stone. The pull of the thread was stronger now, as if the universe itself were urging him to act. He understood the weight of his decision. He knew that the balance was fragile, and it would not be easy to maintain, but he also understood that the choice wasn't just about saving the world. It was about understanding the connections between all things, the interwoven threads that bound everything together. This is my role, he realized, to hold the balance, to protect the thread. He stepped back. From the stone, his mind clearer than it had ever been. The journey was not just about following the pull of the thread. It was about knowing when to let go and when to hold on. He would have to make choices, difficult ones, sacrifices that would define the future. With one last look at the stone, Elian turned and began to walk again. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now he felt more certain than ever. He was ready. The balance was his responsibility, and he would carry it, no matter the cost. The thread would not unravel, not on his watch, and as the mist parted around him, Elian stepped forward into the unknown, the pull of the thread guiding him, the weight of his purpose clear in his heart. The journey was far from over, but for the first time he felt ready to face whatever came next. The path before him was clearer now, but Elian's every step was filled with the weight of the decision he had made. The pull of the thread, once, A gentle tug was now an undeniable force guiding him towards something he couldn't quite define. The world around him seemed to shift with each step, as if the very fabric of reality was reacting to his choices, weaving new patterns in response to the balance he was trying to maintain. The landscape had begun to change again, subtly but undeniably. The mist was thinner now, the air cooler, and the trees had started to grow more sparse, their branches stretching toward him like outstretched arms. The ground beneath him was softer, as though it too was aware of the weight of his journey. He could feel it beneath his feet, as if the earth itself was responding to his every movement, shifting in tune with the thread that now flowed so deeply within him. But despite the clarity he had gained, despite the deep understanding of the thread's true nature, there was still a sense of unease that lingered. The choice he had made, what he had chosen to protect, had come with a cost, a sacrifice. And though he had accepted it, the weight of what he would have to give up still pressed heavily on him. The balance was fragile, and every step he took was one closer to the consequences that would come with it. Ahead of him, the path opened into a clearing, the space bathed in a soft, otherworldly light. There was something different about this place, something more alive. The air vibrated with a quiet hum, and Elian could feel the pull of the thread here, stronger than ever. But it was no longer just the energy of the thread guiding him. There was something more in the air, a presence that filled the clearing, though he couldn't see it. It was as though the very land around him was alive, watching, waiting. He stepped into the center of the clearing, and as he did, the pull grew even stronger. The thread vibrated within him, pulling tighter, like a knot that had been wound too tightly. He could feel the world around him stretching, responding to the force he was carrying within him. The pull wasn't just coming from ahead. It was coming from all around him, as though the universe itself was reaching out to connect with him. And in that moment, Elian realized the true weight of the thread. It wasn't just a force to be guided. It was a living, breathing part of everything. And it needed him. His breath caught in his chest as he stood in the center of the clearing, the energy around him thickening, intensifying. The thread, the balance, it all rested on his shoulders now. He could feel the weight of every decision he had made, every choice that had led him here. The path was his to walk, but the consequences were far-reaching, more than he could ever fully understand. The hum in the air grew louder, and Elian's senses sharpened. He could hear whispers now, soft voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They weren't words so much as they were impressions, fleeting, thoughts that danced through his mind, urging him to understand. They were not his thoughts, but they were familiar, like echoes of something he had always known but never fully understood. "You are not alone." The words rang in his mind, clear and resonant. The thread that connected him to everything, to everyone, wasn't just about balance. It was about understanding the interconnectedness of all things, seeing the threads that tied every living being, every moment together. And then, as if in response to his thoughts, the whispers grew louder. The voices weren't speaking to him alone. They were speaking to the universe itself, to the very fabric of existence, to the choices that shaped it. The thread was not just his burden to carry, it was his purpose, his gift, and it was his responsibility to protect it no matter the cost. The world around him seemed to shimmer as the energy intensified. The air crackled with power, and Elian felt himself being pulled inward, deeper into the very core of the thread. It was no longer just a connection to the world, it was the world itself, alive within him, woven into his soul. His hands tingled with the power that surged through him, and he knew with unshakable certainty that this was the moment he had been preparing for. The moment when the thread, the balance and the universe itself would hinge on his decision. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the air, feeling the energy around him ripple like a stone thrown into a still pond. The world seemed to open up before him, showing him countless paths, countless choices, all of them intertwined with the thread he carried. He could see the lives, the futures, the choices that would shape everything. And as he touched the thread within him, he felt the weight of it all. "Everything is connected," the voices whispered, their tone both urgent and calm. "And the thread is in your hands. Elian closed his eyes, feeling the pull of the universe. Around him, the connection that tied him to everything. He understood now this was his purpose, to protect the balance, to choose the threads that would bind and those that would break, to understand that not everything could endure, but that each choice, each action, would shape the future. He wasn't just the keeper of the thread, he was the one who could shape it, who could weave it, who could choose which paths to preserve and which to unravel. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the energy around him intensifying as he embraced his role, as he embraced the responsibility of the thread. The weight was heavy, but it was his to carry. And he would carry it not with fear, but with the quiet certainty that he was meant to walk this path. As he took his first step forward, the world shifted again, the path ahead clearer now, more defined. He knew the journey was far from over, but he was ready. The balance was in his hands, and he would protect it no matter the cost. The thread was his to carry, his to protect, and the world, with all its complexities, with all its choices, would unfold before him, guided by the steady hand of the one who understood the balance. Ilian's mind buzzed with a quiet clarity as he moved deeper into the realm. The pull of the thread within him had not faltered. It had only become stronger, more profound, as if the entire universe was aligning around him, urging him forward. He had made his choice. There was no turning back now. The weight of it settled in his chest like the first breath after a long plunge into cold water. He was ready, though the path ahead was still shrouded in mystery. The air around him hummed, the energy of the world vibrating with every step he took, every thought he entertained. The trees, now distant in their appearance, seemed to respond to his presence. Their branches twisted upward, their leaves shimmering as though they were part of some greater system, some grand design. The ground beneath his feet had softened once more, but this time it didn't feel like the earth was yielding to him. It felt like the earth itself was welcoming him back into its fold. The path was no longer a winding, unclear series of steps, but had transformed into a clear road, stretching out before him with purpose. He didn't question it. He didn't have to. The world was shifting for him, shifting around him, and everything was falling into place, aligning with the beat of the thread. He knew this place, even if he couldn't name it. It was familiar yet foreign, like a dream he had forgotten the moment he woke, but now remembered clearly in the silence of this journey, and yet the knowledge he carried within him, the weight of his decisions, the responsibility of the thread was heavier now than ever. He understood its intricacies, its delicate balance, but the realization of how fragile that balance was seemed to hang in the air, surrounding him like an invisible storm. He was tethered to it, but so was everything else. The pull was a constant, and he realized with some unsettling certainty that his next steps might lead him into the very heart of that storm. Ahead, the path opened up into a large, expansive space, larger than any clearing he had seen so far. It felt like the epicenter of everything that had happened, everything that would happen. The sky above had grown darker, the stars overhead twinkling with unnatural clarity, and in the distance Elian could see something, a distant, towering structure that loomed on the horizon, shining with the same pale light he had seen before. This place felt like the heart of the thread itself. But as he moved forward, something shifted. The pull, though still strong, was now accompanied by a subtle resistance, as if the very air had begun to grow heavy with expectation. The ground beneath his feet vibrated, and the path ahead seemed to narrow, growing more uncertain as the mist around him deepened. It was as though something had changed in the very fabric of the world, something he couldn't yet comprehend, but something he could feel in the core of his being. The light from the distant structure grew brighter as he neared it, but the closer he got, the more Elian sensed the resistance, like the world was watching him, waiting for him to choose how to move forward. The decisions he had made were guiding him to this point, but they were not the final ones. There was something else here, something that would shape his journey in ways he couldn't yet predict. With each step, the pull of the thread became louder in his mind, like a soft chorus rising around him, a song of the universe itself, reminding him of the importance of his choices. And yet, as he moved, there was something else growing within him, A question, an uncertainty that had been buried beneath his resolve. The path before him had always seemed clear, but now it was full of shadows, full of unknowns. He reached the edge of the expansive space, where the light from the towering structure bathed the ground in a soft, ethereal glow. As he approached, the resistance seemed to pull at him more strongly, as if the very air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do. Elian stopped at the edge, taking in the view before him. The structure seemed to rise out of the earth itself, its shape ancient, its surface covered in glowing symbols that shifted and shimmered with an otherworldly energy. It was both familiar and alien, like something ancient that had always been waiting for him. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of everything, the responsibility, the choices, the knowledge that the thread he carried was both a gift and a burden. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: he was the one who would determine how it unfolded. His choices would shape the world, and those choices began here at the very heart of the thread. With a deep breath, Elian stepped forward, crossing the threshold of light that led toward the towering structure. As he moved, the resistance grew stronger, but so did the pull. It wasn't just the thread urging him forward anymore. It was something within him, something deep and ancient, telling him that he was meant for this, that the choices before him were his to make. The structure seemed to draw closer, its light intensifying, and Elian could feel the power of it, raw, untamed, and full of possibilities. He reached out, his hand trembling as he neared the surface of the structure, the symbols glowing brighter with each step. The moment his hand made contact, the world around him seemed to shudder, the energy rippling through the air. A flash of light filled the space, and for a moment Elian was surrounded by pure, blinding brilliance. His mind flooded with images, visions of worlds, of people, of decisions made and paths taken, all of them converging into this single moment. The thread pulsed within him, guiding him, telling him what he had to do. As the light faded, the world settled again, and Elian stood alone in the vast space, the structure before him now calm, as if waiting for him to make his final decision. The pull of the thread was still there, but it was no longer a force guiding him blindly. It was a part of him, and the path he had to walk was one he would now shape. His choices were his own to make. He could no longer rely solely on the thread to lead him. Now he would choose how to wield it. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on his chest, but Elian stood tall, feeling the power within him rise to meet the challenge. The path ahead was not just one of discovery, it was one of creation, of shaping the future. And as he took the first step toward the structure, he knew that the choice was his, and whatever came next would be the result of his own actions, his own understanding of the balance that had been entrusted to him. The air around Elian seemed to hold its breath as he approached the towering structure. His heart beat steadily in his chest, each thump a reminder that he was walking a path that would shape not only his future, but the future of everything. The pull of the thread within him was unwavering, steady, but now it no longer felt like a guiding force. It felt like a shared rhythm, something he was both a part of and responsible for. He reached the base of the structure, his fingers brushing lightly against the stone's surface. The symbols that had glowed softly before now seemed to pulse, each shift in their pattern vibrating through him, as though the very energy of the world was being transferred into his body. The thread hummed within him, resonating with the vibrations of the structure, as if everything was interconnected, every piece of the puzzle coming into alignment. As he touched the stone more fully, a sudden surge of energy rushed through him, and for a moment, the world blurred. The air around him seemed to shimmer, the very fabric of reality warping and bending. He saw visions, brief flashes of moments from his journey, images of people, of places, of decisions, all connected by the thread. The faces of those he had met along the way, the figure in the mist, the voices that had guided him, each one a part of something larger, something infinitely complex. The pull of the thread became stronger, and for the first time, Elian felt that it was not just guiding him, it was becoming him. He could feel the weight of the decisions before him, the responsibility of the path he had walked, and the choices he would make. The clarity was overwhelming. Yet there was no fear. There was only an understanding, an acceptance of what had to be done. The stone before him began to shift, its surface rippling like water, and the glowing symbols began to rearrange, forming new patterns, new shapes. Elian's fingers tingled with the energy that surged from the structure, and a deep, resonant voice filled the air around him. "You are the keeper of the balance, Elian," the voice said, though it did not come from a single direction. It was all around him as though the very world was speaking to him. But the thread is not something to be held without consequence. It binds all things, but in binding it also divides. The path you walk is yours alone, but the choices you make will affect the course of all things. Elian's breath quickened, and his heart beat faster in response to the words. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for, the moment of ultimate choice. The weight of the thread, the balance of the world, all of it rested on him. He was the keeper, but the keeper was also a part of the balance. Every decision would shift the fabric of the universe, for better or worse. He stepped back from the stone, the energy within him still surging. The figure's words rang in his mind, and for a moment he stood motionless as the enormity of the decision pressed down on him. He had always known that the thread connected all things, that it was both a gift and a responsibility, but now he saw the full scope of what it meant to carry that responsibility. What price would he have to pay? The question hovered in his mind, unresolved as he turned toward the path ahead. The road was still there, winding through the changing landscape, the pull of the thread guiding him onward. But now there was a choice to be made. The balance was his to protect, but at what cost? As he walked, the path began to narrow, the trees closing in once more. The once clear way forward was now shrouded in darkness, and the faint light of the distant structure was just out of reach. The weight of the decision grew heavier with each step, but Elian felt a deep, calm certainty that this was the next part of the journey. He had made it this far, and he would see it through. The world around him seemed to shift again, the landscape becoming more fluid, as though it were responding to the very energy within him. The thread pulsed, its rhythm steady, as if it were waiting for him to make his next move. And as he moved forward, the landscape began to open up once again, revealing a new path, a new direction, one he had not seen before, but one that felt as if it had always been waiting for him. The voices that had whispered to him, guiding him, were quieter now, their presence more distant but still felt. The thread within him remained steady, as though it were a part of him now, inseparable from his very being. The weight of the choice still lingered, but it no longer felt as daunting. He understood now that the balance wasn't just about protection, it was about understanding what needed to be preserved and what needed to be released. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He didn't know what lay ahead, what the future held, but he knew this: he would protect the balance. He would make the choices that needed to be made, and he would walk the path no matter where it led. The world before him opened up, revealing a wide, open space, a vast, empty expanse that felt like the very heart of the thread itself. Elian stood at the edge, the pull of the thread growing stronger, urging him forward. The energy of the universe thrummed within him, the rhythm of all things moving in tune with his heart. And as he stepped into the vast expanse, the weight of the world settled into his chest. He was the keeper of the thread. He was the protector of the balance, and no matter the cost, no matter the price, he would walk this path. With each step, the future unfolded before him, and he knew that whatever came next, he was ready. Elian's steps echoed softly in the expansive space ahead of him, the pull of the thread still firm but less insistent now, almost like a quiet heartbeat within him. The vast emptiness of the land seemed to stretch forever, but with each step, the ground felt more solid, more real, as though the very fabric of the world was adjusting to his presence. The energy in the air was heavier now, not oppressive, but weighty with the significance of what he was carrying. The light around him was dim, but there was a clarity to it. Everything bathed in soft shadows, the world in a constant twilight. Elian felt as if he had crossed some unseen threshold, a boundary between what had come before and what was yet to unfold. He was here now, in this space, and with it came the knowledge that whatever happened next would be the culmination of everything he had chosen, everything he had learned, He didn't know how long he walked, only that the space ahead was calling him, pulling him forward with a quiet, yet undeniable force. The clarity he had gained from the visions, from the choices he had made, was with him now, steady like a thread woven into the core of his being. But there was still uncertainty. The weight of the balance, what it truly meant to protect it, still loomed over him. The sacrifice, the letting go, how would he know what was worth preserving and what needed to be released? The thread seemed to respond to his inner turmoil, the pull growing sharper, like a soft whisper in the back of his mind. As he moved forward, the world around him began to shift again. The trees, once sparse, had begun to grow thick, their trunks twisting and weaving together in complex patterns. The foliage grew dense, entangling the path ahead, but the pull of the thread was clear. He was meant to move through it, past the obstacles that rose before him. He stepped forward, pushing through the branches, feeling the weight of each step grow heavier, as if the world itself were testing him, questioning whether he could endure. And yet, there was a quiet confidence in him now, a knowing that the path, though difficult, was his to walk. The thread was his guide, and though the world around him felt uncertain, his purpose was not. As the trees parted, the clearing ahead revealed itself, and Elian stopped in his tracks. At the center of the clearing stood a figure, bathed in soft, glowing light. It was familiar yet different. He had seen this form before, in his dreams, in the visions, the same energy, the same pull, but this time the figure was not distant, not a shadow in the fog. It was solid, real, standing before him, waiting. The figure raised its head slowly, its eyes glowing with the same energy that surged through him. The connection between them was immediate, undeniable. The thread between them vibrated, pulsing, in perfect harmony. The figure did not speak at first, but Elian could feel its presence, its awareness. It was not just a being, it was part of the balance, part of everything he had come to understand. "You have come far, Elian," the figure's voice was low, resonant, but not unfamiliar. It was like the voice of the world itself, the very fabric of existence speaking to him. "But the path is not yet complete." Elian stood firm, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I understand," he said, though the uncertainty in his own voice betrayed him. "I am here to protect the balance. But what is the next step?" The figure's gaze softened, its presence expanding, filling the clearing with a deep, calming energy. "You have learned much, but the final test is one of understanding, of acceptance. The thread is not just something to be wielded. It is part of you, part of everything. It is a force of connection, but it is also a force of division. You must choose, Elian. What will you protect and what will you release?" The weight of the question settled in his chest, the air around him thick with expectation. He had already understood the balance, the sacrifices it required, but now the figure had brought him to the edge of something greater. The choice he had made before, the path he had walked, was not the end. This was the moment where everything would unfold. He could feel it, like a knot pulling tighter in his chest. "I have to decide what matters," Elian said softly, more to himself than to the figure, as if the words were only just beginning to form in his mind. "What matters enough to protect, and what must be left behind?" The figure nodded slowly, as if it had been waiting for him to reach that realization. "Yes. The balance is not static. It moves, shifts, and the choices you make now will shape the world to come. The thread you carry is not yours alone. It connects all things, everything, every being, every moment. But nothing lasts forever. Some threads must be severed, others must be tied again. And the path you choose will determine how those threads are woven." Elian's thoughts raced as he considered the weight of its words. What was worth holding on to? What should be allowed to slip away? There was no simple answer, no easy solution. But he understood now that the thread was not just a thing to be preserved. It was part of the world's constant evolution. The balance required more than preservation. It required choice, understanding, and above all, release. "I'm ready," Elian said quietly, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "I will protect what I must, and let go of what I must." The figure's glow seemed to intensify, the light enveloping him in a radiant warmth. The thread within him pulsed, responding to the decision he had made, resonating with the energy of the universe around him. The figure stepped back, its form dissolving into the light as it spoke one last time, its voice now a soft, distant whisper. "You are the keeper of the balance, Elian. And now, you must walk the path forward. The thread is yours to protect. What you choose will echo throughout time." The light began to fade, leaving Elian standing alone in the clearing, the pull of the thread now calm within him. The path ahead was still uncertain, but the clarity he had found filled him with a quiet certainty. His journey was far from over, but he was ready. The balance would be protected, and the thread would continue as it always had, woven through the fabric of all things. Elian took a deep breath, his mind clear, his heart steady. The world was waiting for him, and whatever choices lay ahead, he knew one thing: the thread would guide him. Elian stood still in the fading light, the weight of his decision settling around him like a mantle he could not remove. The clearing before him was now silent, the air thick with the stillness of a world in flux. The thread was now a constant within him, its pull steady but calm, as though it had been woven into his very soul. Every choice, every moment had led him here, but now, for the first time, the path ahead seemed both uncertain and inevitable. The figure's words still echoed in his mind. The thread is not just something to be wielded. It is a force of connection, but it is also a force of division. You must choose, Elian. What will you protect and what will you release? Those words had not left him, their meaning unfolding slowly, layer by layer. The balance was not simply a matter of preservation. It was a matter of understanding what could be held and what had to be let go. The path he was on was not a destination. It was a living thing, growing with each decision, each sacrifice. He took a slow, steady breath and looked around. The landscape felt more tangible now, the mist no longer thick, but lingering around the edges like memories he could almost grasp, but could not fully understand. The energy of the thread pulsed softly within him, like a heartbeat that kept him grounded. But there was something else now, something new. The clearing had shifted, not just in its shape, but in its atmosphere. It was as if the very fabric of the world had changed with his choice. His hand instinctively moved to his chest, where the thread seemed to lie beneath his skin, pulsing gently as if in response to his thoughts. He could feel its hum deep within him, resonating with the ancient energy of the world. The clarity he had found earlier, about the balance, about the thread, had not erased the uncertainty. It had only brought him closer to the truth that the balance was dynamic, shifting, and ultimately it would require him to make choices, choices that no one could make but him. The path ahead was no longer just a road. It was a series of forks, of decisions yet to be made, of moments yet to unfold. As he moved forward, the pull of the thread grew stronger, the gentle hum within him guiding him towards something he could not yet see. The light from the distant structure had faded completely, but now there was a new light ahead, soft and steady, not as brilliant as before, but more constant, like the first light of dawn. With each step, the path seemed to form itself before him. The trees that lined the way stretched upward, their branches reaching out as if to touch him, to guide him. The ground beneath him was soft yet firm, supporting him as he moved. There was no hesitation in his steps now, no lingering doubts. The choices he had made were his to own, and they would shape everything that came next. As the path narrowed, Elian's thoughts turned inward. He could no longer see the distant horizon, but he knew it was there, beyond the trees, beyond the path he was walking. And in the quiet pull of the thread, he realized that every step, every choice was a step into that unknown. It was the first time in his journey that he truly understood what it meant to walk forward without knowing the outcome, to make decisions, not based on certainty but on faith. Ahead, the path opened into another clearing, larger than the last, bathed in soft twilight. The air felt different here, thicker, charged with the energy of something ancient, something that had been waiting. The pull of the thread was no longer just a guide. It was a call, a summons to something beyond his understanding. As Elian stepped into the clearing, the ground beneath him seemed to hum with life, as though it too was connected to the very thread he carried. At the center of the clearing stood another structure, taller and more imposing than any he had encountered before. It was not a stone, not like the others, but something more fluid, as if it were made of light itself. The structure was pulsating with a gentle rhythm, its surface shifting and shimmering with energy. The air around it seemed to vibrate with the same hum that filled him, the same pull, but now it was stronger than ever. Elian felt his heart quicken as he moved closer to it. The thread within him thrummed in response, vibrating with the intensity of the connection. He could feel the energy of the structure, as if it were reaching out to him, asking him to approach, to understand. The clearing around him seemed to breathe, alive with energy, waiting for something, waiting for him. He stopped just before the structure, his hand resting by his side, feeling the pull of the thread stronger than ever. He could see the patterns of light shifting on the surface of the structure, the way the energy seemed to flow through it, and for the first time he realized what he had to do. The choices he had made before, the sacrifices, the letting go, had been leading him here to this moment. The thread was not just something he carried, it was something he would now shape. With a steady breath, Elian stepped forward, placing his hand against the shimmering surface of the structure. The moment he made contact, a surge of energy rushed through him, filling him with a force so powerful it almost knocked him off balance. The structure seemed to pulse, the light surrounding him growing brighter, more intense, until it felt like he was standing at the center of the universe itself. Images flashed through his mind, visions of the past, the present, and the future, all connected by the thread. He saw the choices, the moments, the lives that had intersected with his own. And he understood for the first time that the thread was not just a guide, it was a part of him, a part of everything. It was a living thing, not static, but dynamic, constantly shifting, constantly growing. It was his to shape, but it was also his responsibility to understand. The balance was fragile, and each choice he made would either strengthen it or tear it apart. The light around him began to fade, and as it did, Elian felt the pull of the thread settle into a steady rhythm, its energy flowing through him like a river of light. The clearing, the structure, the world around him, all of it seemed to align as if everything was waiting for him to make the next move. With a deep breath, Elian stepped back from the structure, feeling the energy within him. Calm. The path ahead was clearer now, and he understood what he had to do. He was the keeper of the balance, the protector of the thread, and whatever came next he would face it not as a burden, but as his purpose. The world seemed to fall into stillness as he began to walk once again, the thread steady within him, guiding him forward, and with each step, the weight of his responsibility felt less like a burden and more like a gift. The air around Elian seemed to still as he walked away from the shimmering structure, its glow fading into the soft shadows of the clearing. The world around him was quiet now, almost too quiet, as though everything were holding its breath in anticipation. The thread within him hummed with the energy of the choice he had made, yet there was still a sense of something unfulfilled, something lingering just beyond his reach. He had made his decision. The balance was his to protect, the threads were his to weave and unravel. Yet even now, as the path stretched out before him, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to understand, more to uncover. The pull of the thread had not ceased. It was still there, quiet but insistent, like a whisper in his mind urging him forward. The landscape around him was changing again, the trees thinning out, their branches no longer twisting into complex patterns but instead stretching upward, as though reaching for the sky. The fog that had surrounded him seemed to part, giving way to an open space, the soft light of the world growing dimmer, like the last fading moments of dusk before the night. It was a place of transition, a threshold, as if the world itself was waiting for him to cross into something new. Elian moved forward, the weight of the thread steady in his chest. His thoughts raced, but his steps were calm, deliberate. The path ahead was still unclear, but he knew that each decision he made now would shape not just the world around him, but the very thread that connected everything. The balance was delicate, fragile. Every choice, every action had its consequences. Ahead he saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was not like the figures he had encountered before. This one was familiar yet different, as if it were a part of the very world itself. The figure was not made of flesh or stone, but of light, its form shimmering and shifting, like something that was not bound by time or space. It radiated a calm, quiet power, and as Elian approached, he could feel the thread within him vibrating in response, as if the very fabric of the universe was acknowledging this presence. When he reached the figure, it turned to face him, its presence both comforting and overwhelming. The energy that surrounded it was not invasive, but it filled the space around them, connecting them in a way that Elian could not fully understand, but could feel deep within him. "You've come." The figure's voice was soft, but there was a deep resonance to it, like the sound of wind whispering through a vast empty space. "The path has led you here, Elian, and now you must understand." Elian felt his heart quicken, the weight of the figure's words sinking into him. "Understand what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. It was the question that had followed him since the beginning of his journey, the question that had driven him forward, through every choice, every moment of uncertainty. The figure's form seemed to shimmer, the light around it shifting as if reacting to Elian's presence. "The balance is not something to be kept, Elian. It is something to be understood. It is not about controlling the thread, but about understanding how it connects everything. All things, life, death, growth, decay, are woven together by the thread, and the world you protect is a part of it, a part of you." The figure's words filled the space around Elian, settling over him like a blanket, soft but heavy with meaning. He understood the weight of them, but he also felt a deep, quiet truth in them. The thread was not his to control. It was not something to be held or protected at all costs. It was something to be understood. "The choices you've made," the figure continued, "have been shaped by the thread, but they have also shaped it. The balance you protect is not a static thing. It is fluid, changing, evolving with every choice, every action. You are a part of that. And the world you shape is a reflection of the choices you make now." Elian stood still, the full weight of the figure's words sinking into him. The thread was not a force to be controlled. It was a part of him, a part of everything. And now, he realized, the responsibility he had carried was not just about protecting the world. It was about understanding it, knowing that every decision he made, every choice, would ripple through the fabric of the universe, changing it in ways he couldn't foresee. The figure seemed to sense his understanding, its presence shifting, becoming lighter, as if it were pleased with his comprehension. "You are ready, Elian," it said, its voice softer now, almost soothing. "The balance is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. The thread connects all things, but it is the choices you make that will determine how it is woven. You will shape the world, but in doing so, you will also shape yourself." Elian nodded slowly, feeling a calmness settle over him, a quiet certainty. He had understood the weight of the thread, the balance, but now he understood its deeper meaning. The thread was not something outside of him. It was a part of him, a part of everything. And the choices he made would not only shape the world, but would also shape the very nature of the thread itself. The figure stepped back, its form slowly dissolving into the light, leaving Elian standing alone in the clearing. The pull of the thread still vibrating softly within him. The weight of his responsibility was still there, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was a part of him, a part of the world, and he was ready to embrace it. The path ahead was still unclear, but Elian knew now that it was his to walk. The balance would not be maintained through control or fear, but through understanding, through acceptance. And with that understanding, he took a deep breath and stepped forward once again, the thread guiding him, the weight of his purpose steady within him. The journey was not over, but with each step, he was closer to understanding the true nature of the balance, and closer to the world he was meant to shape. Elian's footsteps seemed to echo softly in the stillness around him as he moved through the clearing. The pull of the thread was more defined now, like a steady pulse in his chest guiding him, yet he no longer felt uncertain. He had passed through the trials, made his choices, and understood the weight of the balance he was entrusted with. The thread wasn't just a power to be wielded. It was the fabric of everything, woven into the very core of the world, and he, in a way, had become a part of that weave. As he continued walking, the landscape shifted once again. The path ahead had become less defined, more like a labyrinth with twisting trees and thick underbrush that seemed to grow and rearrange themselves with each step he took. The air grew denser, as if the very world around him was holding its breath, waiting for him to decide how to move forward. He felt it again, a whisper on the wind, faint but undeniable. The world is not bound by what you see. The balance is more fragile than you think. It is shaped not only by what you protect, but by what you choose to release. The words seemed to come from all around him, like the voice of the world itself, echoing through the trees. The weight of the decision he had made, the understanding that the balance required release as much as protection, pressed heavily on him once again. How much was he willing to give up? What would be the cost of maintaining the delicate harmony he had come to understand? The path before him narrowed, the trees closing in, their branches thick and heavy, almost as though they were trying to keep him from moving forward. But the thread inside him pulled stronger, urging him to press on. He could feel the world around him shifting, responding to his presence, to his every movement. The balance was alive, and he was its keeper, its guide. But he was also bound by it, connected to it in a way he could no longer deny. As Elian moved deeper into the forest, the world around him seemed to blur, the trees becoming less distinct, the shadows lengthening and the air growing colder. The pull of the thread was stronger now, its hum almost deafening, filling his senses. He couldn't tell where the thread began and where it ended. It was part of everything, the trees, the ground, the sky, and it was part of him. Then ahead he saw it, something that caught his attention through the haze. A faint glow, a flicker of light through the trees. At first it seemed like nothing more than a trick of the mind, the reflection of starlight or the distant glow of something he had missed. But as he drew closer, the light solidified into something more, a figure standing alone in the clearing, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. The figure was tall, cloaked in a robe of shifting shadows that seemed to blend with the night itself. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but Elian could feel the presence of the figure deep within his chest, as though it had always been a part of the thread he had carried. The pull of the thread was strongest here, as though the figure was the very source of it, the origin of everything he had come to understand. He stopped a few paces away, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure did not move, but Elian could feel its gaze even without seeing its eyes. It was as if it were waiting for him, as though it knew exactly what he was about to ask. "I've come far," Elian said, his voice steady, though his words were more of a statement than a question. "I've made my choices. I understand the balance, the thread, and the responsibility I carry, but what happens now?" The figure's form shifted slightly, as if acknowledging him, and then, in a voice that was both familiar and distant, it spoke. "The journey has only just begun, Elian," it said, its voice like the wind, soft yet resonant. "You have learned what it means to walk the thread, to protect the balance, but the thread does not end here. The world does not end here. There are others who walk it, others who will challenge the balance you seek to protect. Your choices will shape everything, but you must understand that the thread you carry connects all things, life, death, creation, destruction, and it is not yours alone to shape." Elian's heart skipped a beat. He had known that his journey was not over, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. There was more to be done, more to understand. "What must I do?" Elian asked, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "What comes next?" The figure stood still, its presence growing stronger, the air around them vibrating with energy. "The balance you protect is not one that can be forced, Elian. It cannot be controlled. It must be allowed to evolve, to shift with the needs of the world. You are the keeper, but you are also a part of it. Your choices, your actions, will determine whether the balance survives or collapses under its own weight. The thread you carry is both a gift and a burden, but it is not yours to keep, it is the world's to shape, to protect, to release." Elian's mind raced as the figure's words sunk in. Release. He had understood that the balance required protection, but the idea that it also required release, that some things must be let go, felt like a new revelation. It was not just About holding on. It was about knowing when to let go. You must go beyond what you have learned, Elian, the figure continued, its voice softer now. The thread is more than just what binds the worlds together. It is the essence of change, and you must learn to embrace it. The figure stepped back into the shadows, its form fading with the light, leaving Elian standing alone in the clearing. The energy around him shifted, settling into a new rhythm, as if the very world had adjusted to the weight of his decisions. He felt the pull of the thread, stronger than ever. But now, it was not just guiding him. It was asking him to understand. To embrace it in its entirety. Elian took a deep breath, his mind clearing as the weight of everything he had learned settled within him. The choices were his to make. The path was his to walk. But now he understood that the thread was not just something to protect. It was something to live with, to evolve with, and to shape with the knowledge that balance was not static. It was fluid. And as he took the first step forward, the path ahead clearer than ever before, Elian knew that the journey was far from over. The thread would guide him, but it would also change him. And it was time for him to embrace that change. Elian's breath came slowly, his footsteps echoing through the dense, still air of the clearing as he moved forward. The figure had faded, leaving only its words and the steady hum of the thread within him. For the first time, the path ahead seemed less like a road to be traveled and more like a journey to be embraced. The pull of the thread, once so insistent, now felt like a quiet companion, a reminder of the path he had chosen and the choices yet to come. He moved through the clearing, the trees standing tall and watchful, their branches swaying gently in the wind that seemed to follow him. The air, though still thick with the weight of his thoughts, held a quiet calm, as though the world around him was adjusting, recalibrating itself to the understanding he had gained. The balance, the thread, it was not something static, it was fluid, shifting with the choices he made, and Elian now realized that the weight of those decisions was something to be carried with grace, not fear. As he walked, the landscape shifted, again the path narrowing, as if the very world was drawing him closer to something, pulling him toward the heart of everything. The thread pulsed gently within him, a steady rhythm that matched the beat of his heart. It was a part of him now, as much a part of his being as the breath in his lungs, and with that connection came a deeper understanding. The path led him to a ridge overlooking a vast expanse. Far below, the land stretched out in every direction, a tapestry of green and gold, dotted with winding rivers, small villages, and distant mountains. The sight took Elian's breath away, not just for its beauty, but for the realization that this was the world he had been entrusted with. The thread connected all things, his actions, his choices. They rippled through this landscape, shaping its course, its balance. The pull of the thread seemed stronger here, almost urgent, as if the very fabric of reality was waiting for him. To understand something deeper, he stepped forward, feeling the power of the world beneath his feet, the pulse of the thread flowing through him. The figure had spoken of release, of letting go, but what did that truly mean? He had made sacrifices, but what more could he give? What was it that needed to be released? The wind shifted, and Elian heard the faintest whisper in the air. It wasn't a voice, but a presence, like the breath of the earth itself guiding him forward. He stepped closer to the edge of the ridge, the vast world before him unfolding like an ancient story, one that he was now a part of, and one that was far from finished. The thread hummed louder now, almost overwhelming, its pull stronger than ever, as though the very world was speaking to him, asking him to understand the balance in its entirety. What must be released? He wondered again, the question echoing in his mind. He could feel the answer now, not in words, but in the steady rhythm of the world around him. To release didn't mean destruction. It didn't mean tearing apart what was beautiful, what was whole. It meant understanding that some things, no matter how dear, had to be allowed to change, to fade, to evolve. Holding onto them too tightly would distort the very fabric of the thread. Sometimes, to preserve the balance, one had to let go, not of the world itself, but of the way it had been, the way it was expected to remain. The pull of the thread became quieter now, its urgency replaced by a deep, steady peace, as though the world had been waiting for him to understand this. And in that understanding, the weight of the decision to protect the balance, to let go, began to lift from his shoulders. The thread wasn't something that needed to be held tightly. It was something that needed to be woven with care, with awareness. He turned away from the ridge, his path clear, the energy within him calm. The landscape before him seemed to shift again, the trees parting, the road ahead opening wider, as if the world itself were responding to his choice, to his understanding. The journey had not ended. It would never end. But Elian knew now that the path forward wasn't one of control. It wasn't one of fear or certainty. It was one of connection, of understanding the delicate threads that bound everything together and knowing when to let go. The thread pulsed once more within him, its rhythm steady and calm, and with it the knowledge that the balance was not a burden to be carried alone. It was a force of nature, of life, of change, and he would walk it not with fear but with acceptance. The thread had shaped him, and now it was time for him to shape the world in return. With one final, steadying breath, Elian stepped forward, into the world, the thread still within him, the balance now something he understood. The path ahead was his to walk, and the world was waiting, ready to unfold. And with that, Elian's journey continued, the threads of his choices weaving a future that would forever be shaped by his understanding, his connection and the balance he had sworn to protect.